The night had not yet completely faded. A bright, spotless moon still hung high in the sky, casting a clear silver gray sheen over the grand ducal residence. This day had finally come. In the silent dawn, a soft female voice rose like a sigh. Claire stood before the tall, magnificent doors at the base of the ducal residence, carrying only a simple travel bag in her hand. She wore a plain grass-green dress, and her long dark brown hair was loosely tied behind her head with a ribbon of the same color. In this splendid mansion, glittering with luxury and wealth at every turn, her figure seemed so small and insignificant. "At least I don't have much luggage to take with me," she murmured under her breath, the corners of her lips lifting into a self-mocking smile. A faint stir came from the hall behind her. Two young maids in uniform hurried over, their faces full of worry and reluctance. "Madam, are you really leaving?" one of them finally asked, her voice trembling slightly. Claire slowly turned around. The first ray of dawn filtered through the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows and fell softly across her profile. In those rare, violet-like, beautiful eyes of hers, there was no sorrow and no resentment, only the calm peace and release of a still lake. She did not answer. She only gave them a gentle, tranquil smile. That smile seemed to contain 1,000 unspoken words, yet in the end, it settled into silence. She turned away and walked down the steps without the slightest hesitation, her figure gradually disappearing into the courtyard's blooming white flowers. That slender back looked as though it might vanish at any moment. "Madam," a voice called after her, carrying a trace of despair. But Claire never paused. Just then, a tall figure appeared in the hall. The Duke, dressed in a perfectly tailored military uniform, with dazzling golden hair, seemed to have only just noticed the commotion by the door. His face showed a flicker of confusion and alarm. When he saw the retreating figure in the distance, his pupils suddenly tightened. "Claire!" She left. His deep voice was filled with disbelief. He slowly turned and looked at the two red-eyed maids. "Yes, my lord." One of the maids lowered her head, took a neatly folded letter from her chest, and offered it with both hands. "Madam asked us to give this to you." The Duke's gaze fell on the letter. There was no name on the envelope, only the familiar, elegant handwriting. Silently, he reached out and took it, his fingers whitening slightly from how hard he gripped it. He opened the envelope, and only two words met his eyes. "Divorce. Divorce," he muttered, as if unable to understand the meaning of those two words. "That's impossible." His thoughts were instantly dragged back to the past, back to the day they made that absurd agreement. Claire sat inside the carriage, her hands folded neatly on her knees. The scenery outside sped backward, just like the 1 year of dazzling yet unreal life she had left behind as Duchess. "Your Grace," she repeated the familiar form of address in her heart. By now, he probably already had finally met the person he truly loved. A bitter smile touched her lips. That had been the purpose of their contract, hadn't it? To give him freedom, so he could pursue his real happiness. She shook her head lightly, trying to cast off those tangled thoughts. "No, this won't do. It's all over now. I shouldn't think about it anymore." Even now, everything still felt as vivid as if it had happened only yesterday. A thin mist rose in Claire's violet eyes, and memories came flooding back like a tide, vivid and profound. It had been at a lively banquet. The Imperial Palace Banquet Hall was magnificent, with enormous crystal chandeliers casting brilliant light over the marble floors and the finely dressed nobles drinking and chatting together. But that harmonious noise was broken by a sudden commotion. "Did you hear?" A voice rose from the crowd, charged with barely restrained excitement. Duke Irel just arrived. Another young lady craned her neck eagerly. "Look over there." All eyes in the hall were immediately drawn toward him. Wherever he passed, people instinctively stepped aside to make way. He wore a perfectly tailored Royal Guard uniform in white and purple, with a luxurious white fur mantle draped over his shoulders. On his chest, an enormous blood-red gemstone flashed brilliantly in the light. He had short golden hair that looked as though it had been kissed by sunlight, and a pair of sharp, deep green eyes. He was Irel, the youngest duke in the Edel Empire. The moment he appeared, the noble young ladies around him forgot to breathe. He's truly so charming. One lady covered half her face with a fan, though her eyes were full of infatuation. "I wish, even just once, I could touch that soft golden hair." Another whispered to her companion. Praise rose one after another, weaving together like a hymn in his honor. "I heard he made a name for himself in the Knight Order at such a young age." "Yes," and he can handle both the royal guard and, amid the heated discussion, the most crucial question was finally raised. But he still isn't married, right? That question was like a stone dropped into a still lake, sending ripples through the room. Every unmarried young lady present pricked up her ears, hope igniting in her eyes. I wonder who will be the one to win his heart. Amid this fervor of admiration and anticipation, Claire stood alone on the edge of the crowd in silence. She wore a simple sky blue gown, completely out of place among the dazzling finery around her. She did not join the whispering young ladies. She merely watched that radiant man from afar, calm and detached, like an observer. There was no expression on her face, as if none of this had anything to do with her. Just then, a crisp, familiar voice broke her thoughts. "Sister." Claire gave a slight start and turned her head. A flash of surprise appeared in her beautiful violet eyes. That sweet, coquettish voice sounded behind her again. Claire turned and saw her nominal younger sister, Amelia. Amelia, with her fiery red hair, was wearing an elaborate black and red gown adorned with countless layers of lace and gemstones, making her stand out boldly among the crowd. Amelia pouted in dissatisfaction and tugged at Claire's arm as she complained. Although this dress was prepared by His Grace, it still looks like something a commoner would wear. Honestly, Claire said nothing and simply listened quietly. She knew that to Amelia, who always pursued splendor and attention, any design that wasn't extravagant enough was for commoners. Suddenly, Amelia's eyes lit up. She pointed toward the other end of the hall, toward the man surrounded like the stars encircling the moon. "Sister, do you see that man over there?" Claire replied, "Sorry, I've never seen him before." Amelia said in a commanding tone that tolerated no objection, "You're completely useless, honestly. I'll go find him myself." At that moment, a steady and respectful voice interrupted them. Miss Claire, a solemn butler in a tailcoat, had appeared at their side without anyone noticing. "His Grace requests your presence." Claire's heart tightened. She knew it was finally beginning. She nodded to the butler. "I understand." Following the butler, she turned away from the noisy crowd and walked down that quiet corridor leading toward an unknown fate. "Excuse me." A warm, magnetic voice sounded by her ear, pulling her out of her tangled thoughts. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Claire." She looked up. What entered her sight was a handsome, flawless face. Golden hair gleamed softly beneath the gentle light. Those green eyes, carrying the faintest trace of a smile, looked at her warmly. "I am Irel of the Edel family." He introduced himself politely, carrying an air of natural nobility and composure. "I asked you here today because there is something important I wish to discuss with you." He paused, and his tone became more serious. "Would you be willing to hear me out?" Claire stared at him blankly, her mind empty, only able to let out a vague sound of acknowledgement. "Please forgive me, but what did you just say?" She finally found her voice, only to realize it was trembling with disbelief. "Ah, sorry," he said softly. "I realize this may be far too sudden for you." Claire took a deep breath and tried to process that word she had just heard. Her gaze crossed the polished tea table and fixed on him. "What you just said was about marriage, correct?" "Yes, marriage." Irel nodded openly, confirming her question. The word marriage struck her mind like thunder. In an instant, an absurd image flashed before her eyes. Herself in a white wedding dress, standing beside this man before her, a man who was practically a stranger. To be summoned from one place to another and then told something like this, it felt far too unreal. Is this a dream? She unconsciously raised a hand, her fingertips brushing her cheek. The cool touch reminded her, no, this was real. Reality crashed over her like a wave, drowning her completely. But Claire finally gathered her thoughts and voiced the most important question. We've hardly met, haven't we? She lifted her face, her violet eyes full of confusion and incomprehension. "We have crossed paths a few times at banquets," she said as she searched her memory. Those fleeting fragments gradually became clearer. But merely appearing at the same event doesn't mean much. We've never even spoken to each other. The drawing room fell into a brief silence, broken only by the occasional faint clink of teaware. Irel looked at Claire, at those violet eyes filled with bewilderment. He elegantly raised a hand, lightly touching his lower lip, as though organizing his thoughts into clearer words. "Let me explain more clearly." His voice was calm and honest. I turned 25 this year. My parents have been pressuring me to marry for quite a long time. He leaned back against the soft sofa in a relaxed posture, yet there was a trace of helplessness in his words. Especially after I inherited the title, their urging only became more intense. If I don't take action soon, they will probably choose a wife for me themselves. I see, Claire replied quietly, her hands unconsciously clasped on her lap. So that was it, a typical noble's problem. She looked up, about to say something, but Irol seemed to see straight through her question and spoke first. There is someone I have loved since childhood. His words spread through the air, accompanied by a vague and tender image. The back of a beautiful woman standing among flowers, with long black hair and a vivid red flower tucked into it, her whole being radiant like sunlight. This sudden confession made Claire's heart sink. She looked at Irol, and the question nearly escaped her lips at once. Then why don't you simply marry her? She is studying abroad right now. A trace of melancholy flickered in Irol's eyes. She won't return for at least another year. Couldn't you ask your parents to wait one more year? Claire pressed. That seemed like the most reasonable solution. I already did. A trace of frustration crossed Irol's face. But they said we are not formally engaged yet, so it doesn't count. Claire fell silent. She let out a quiet sigh, her hands folded neatly. Her posture was graceful and still. I can understand that. When your partner is so far away, it is only natural for them to be worried. Her understanding clearly surprised Irol. He picked up the delicate teacup before him and took a light sip, as if using it to steady himself. Then he set the cup back onto the saucer with a crisp sound, lifted his eyes, and looked at Claire intently. That is why I am proposing to you. Claire's reflection trembled faintly in the dark tea before her. Her expression froze. She lifted her head, violet eyes full of disbelief, and confirmed each word carefully. You mean, you need a marriage that will last only 1 year? Exactly. At last, a smile of relief appeared on Irol's face, as if he was satisfied by her sharp understanding. Claire repeated those words in her heart. It sounded utterly absurd, and yet within that absurdity, she sharply caught something unusual. She slowly lifted her head. In those beautiful violet eyes, confusion had been replaced by calm scrutiny. It is a ridiculous idea, she said softly, her fingers unconsciously tracing the cold rim of the teacup. But among all the noble ladies, I seem to be the only one you can trust in this situation. Scenes from past banquets flashed through her mind. Duke Irol's gaze had always passed over the chattering, showy noble ladies and rested on some unnoticed corner. She guessed he must have had his reasons. She gently set the teacup back on the table, the clear sound cutting through the short silence. But there is one interesting thing. She looked straight at Irol, her gaze sharp as a blade. Among so many ladies, why me? A trace of approval appeared on Irol's face, as though he had been waiting for that question. The reason is simple. He raised a finger and said unhurriedly, "First, you are very well known, Miss Claire. Your name is known throughout high society." His words were like a key, opening the reality Claire least wished to face. Scene after bleak scene surfaced in her mind. She felt as if she saw herself wrapped in thorns, isolated and trapped. "I understand," Claire said, her voice dropping. The Morris family once stood among the upper nobility. Then a business gamble meant to recover their losses failed. In the end, they were buried in debt. So that meant he had already confirmed the foundation for this marriage arrangement. In that case, I'm not the only daughter. My younger sister could also be considered. She is far more outgoing than I am, and much more charming. I investigated that as well. Your clothing may be plain, but your sister's attire is quite lavish. That is simply her taste. She likes beautiful things. Even so, Irol said, no one who truly understands your family's financial condition would dress that way. Claire was startled. This was unexpected. He had not only investigated, he had also judged the soundness of our judgment. A person who cannot even grasp the seriousness of their own household's condition would never treat this arrangement seriously. You are right. His judgment was sharp and rational. If he had made this proposal to my sister Amelia, she would never have given up her dream prince after only a year. Claire asked, so the compensation for this marriage is financial support for my family. Irol said, yes. I will cover the losses caused by your father's failed dry goods business, and I will provide financial support for the entire following year. That 1 year is extremely important to me. She looked at Irol and thought, he must truly love her. This is far beyond what I expected. He was a surprisingly passionate man. Seeing her silent expression, Irol added, you won't need to bring anything. I only ask that you live as my duchess for 1 year. When she returns, we will divorce. to live as the Duchess. More precisely, you will manage this estate as its mistress. You will attend social functions, interact with my parents, and handle similar matters. But what I sincerely hope is that you can do enough to make them happy. Of course, I will make sure you receive all the support you need while doing so. So merely finding a stand-in would not be enough to fool his parents. Iroh continued, "What do you think? This proposal will greatly benefit your family. If you complete the full 1-year contract smoothly, I will also make sure you're compensated accordingly. We can discuss the details later. But when our year ends, I will ensure your future is secure and free from worry. And I will not allow people to whisper behind your back. I will make sure you can return to society with your head held high." Claire asked, "As long as it is for the woman you love, no price is too great? Is that what you mean?" Iroh answered firmly, "Yes." Claire said, "If I truly have my parents' approval for this marriage, but then I will gladly accept the arrangement." A few days after Claire agreed to that absurd engagement, Duke Iroh showed his decisive nature. Very quickly, he sent a letter saying he hoped to meet with my parents to discuss the matter. Before I could even react, the day of Duke Iroh's visit arrived. The Morris Viscount residence, that old manor long since faded from its former glory, was especially noisy today. "It's so noisy today." Holding her clothes, Claire could not help muttering quietly. Well, that was only to be expected, she told herself. The difficult task of persuading her parents had been entrusted entirely to Duke Iroh. That was not only because she believed the most powerful young duke in the empire had enough influence and bargaining power, but also because she knew very well that even if she explained to herself, her parents would never believe her. In their eyes, she had long ceased to be a daughter worth trusting. It was better to leave everything to this temporary husband. "Thank you both for graciously receiving me today." Iroh's voice was warm and courteous, breaking the silence in the room. He lightly placed a hand over his chest and gave a standard noble greeting. Then his tone shifted. "Actually, I have come today because there is something I wish to ask of Viscount Morris and Viscountess Morris." A duke's request carried a crushing weight for a family already standing on the brink. Without any build-up, Iroh directly dropped a bombshell. "I hope to marry your daughter, Miss Claire." What? Viscount Morris finally found his voice. He stammered, hardly believing what he had heard. "And marry my daughter?" He instinctively took out a handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead, utterly overwhelmed by the shock. A faint curve touched Iroh's lips. Completely composed, he asked, "Yes. Is there something unsuitable about me?" "Of course not." Viscount Morris waved his hands frantically as if he had been burned. So agitated he nearly rose from his seat. He was left incoherent until the butler at his side cried, Please wait. Quickly, go and call my daughter over." Watching the complete chaos before him, Duke Iroh simply sat where he was and took a quiet sip of tea. Easier than I expected. He thought to himself, remembering what Miss Claire had said that day. I had thought convincing her parents would be the hardest part of this plan. Just as the Viscount and Viscountess were flustered beyond words, the elegant carved wooden doors of the drawing room were slowly pushed open. A figure appeared dramatically in the doorway, like a ball of flame. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Lord Iroh. My name is Amelia." She smiled as she introduced herself, her gaze full of coquettish confidence. The joy on Viscount Morris and Viscountess Morris's faces deepened at once. The Viscount even excitedly dabbed at the corners of his eyes with a handkerchief as he said to Iroh, "I never expected my daughter to be so close to you, Lord Iroh." But there was not the slightest joy on Iroh's face. He looked calmly at the farce before him and simply said, "No, that is not the case." His denial froze the Viscount's smile on his face. "Oh, I see," Iroh thought inwardly. So they mistook the person. In a suggestive, wounded tone, Amelia said, "Perhaps I failed to notice your feelings. You could have just told me directly. You've all misunderstood." His voice was not loud, but it carried a cold authority that permitted no challenge. He looked past Amelia, his gaze sweeping over the Viscount and Viscountess, who still clung to their fantasies, and announced each word clearly. "The person I wish to marry is not Miss Amelia." He paused, then made the final answer public. "It is Miss Claire." "What?" Viscountess Morris was the first to react. "You must be joking. Someone as plain and unremarkable as her is utterly unfit to become a duchess. Perhaps you remembered the wrong name." The Viscount hurriedly joined in, trying to salvage the situation. "If you could only meet my elder daughter." Iroh's patience seemed to have run out. He slowly closed his eyes, then opened them again. "In that case," he said coldly, "let us go confirm it ourselves." With that, he ignored everyone's reactions behind him and turned directly toward the door. "Wait, Duke of Edel!" the Viscount cried in panic from behind, but Irol did not stop. Their furniture and decorations were astonishingly extravagant. His gaze landed on a landscape painting, and his eyes sharpened. He thought of the plain, almost shabby light purple dress Claire was wearing. If they sold that painting, they could at least buy her one decent dress. Lord Irol stopped and turned around. At that moment, the the Viscounts' attention finally shifted from his shock to his eldest daughter, who seemed detached from everything around her. "So you're here, Claire." His voice carried both reproach and confusion. She gave a soft response, looking a little flustered. One hand naturally came to rest on her shoulder once more. He bent down close to her ear and murmured in a loving voice loud enough for everyone present to hear. "My beloved sister, what is going on?" Amelia could no longer maintain the appearance of composure. She rushed forward, fists clenched and trembling with agitation, her face full of disbelief. "Claire, tell them we're truly in love, aren't we?" "Amelia." Claire paused before continuing. "It's true. Just as Lord Irol said, I recently accepted his proposal." Amelia's pupils contracted sharply. Her beautiful face twisted with overwhelming shock. "No, impossible," she shrieked, utterly unable to accept the truth. "So, that really is my eldest daughter, Claire?" Viscount Morris's voice shook with extreme shock. He could hardly believe his own eyes. Lord Irol wore a calm, unhurried smile as he lightly held Claire by the shoulder and answered in a tone that allowed no doubt. "Yes." Without question, he looked directly at his future in-laws, his expression sincere and firm. "I sincerely wish to become family with her." The Viscount fumbled out his handkerchief and said awkwardly, "But you surely understand our financial situation. We cannot even afford a dowry. Please don't worry about that." Lord Irol interrupted him with a smile. "I do not need any dowry. As long as I can have her, I want nothing else." Those words struck the Viscount like thunder. He was completely stunned, unable to say a single word for a long while. He lowered his head, his heart in turmoil. I understand," he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. "If someone truly loves my daughter so much, how could I possibly refuse?" "In fact, we have already set the date," Irol announced pleasantly. "It will be on the 3rd of next month." Lord Irol explained it as though it were only natural. When you truly love someone, you cannot wait to be with them as soon as possible. He reassured the bewildered Viscount. "Please rest easy. All the preparations have already been completed. You only need to let matters proceed naturally." Claire, who had remained silent all this time, felt waves rising in her own heart. Everything was happening far too quickly. She thought, is he really that eager to settle this? While her thoughts drifted, a gentle voice came from above her head. "Claire." She suddenly came back to herself and looked up at Irol beside her, meeting his gentle gaze. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered. Though everything had happened with unbelievable speed, as if to prove her thought, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. "When I'm with him, I always feel so safe and at ease." After Irol left, Amelia demanded, "What on earth is going on?" and smashed a vase in rage. Why had no one told her anything? She thought furiously, her gaze sweeping over her silent family like a knife. Wasn't my engagement to the second prince the more important matter? This is unbelievable. Even Mother had said the same thing, hadn't she? She planned to marry you off to some absurdly rich merchant. Claire had always known what her parents thought, but hearing it spoken aloud still hurt. Amelia accused her angrily. "Someone like you, marrying a man like that, it's unimaginable." Claire thought, wait. Amelia's outburst feels strange. A father who avoided conflict, a mother who never once helped me. That thought had coiled around Claire's entire childhood like a poisonous snake. Bloody memories churned through her mind. Because of my birth, I brought them great pain. I was not the son they hoped for, merely another daughter. On the other hand, Amelia's birth had gone smoothly. She was charming and dazzling. Mother held that smiling red-haired baby in her arms with a tenderness and joy Claire had never once received. Naturally, all of her parents' love tilted toward Amelia. With a sharp crack, Amelia could no longer endure it. She slammed the table and sprang to her feet, then rushed to Claire and struck her across the face. "Why? Why is it you?" Amelia's voice was full of jealousy and malice. She simply could not believe that the noble and handsome Lord Irol had chosen this worthless older sister. "You'll never understand." Claire's silence only enraged Amelia further. In Amelia's eyes, that silence was a wordless show of pride and mockery. The wedding truly took place on the 3rd of the next month, just as he had promised. After that, her Her younger sister Amelia's harassment only grew worse. Her words were so cutting and jealous, they nearly drowned Claire. Claire thought, by the day I stood at the altar, the swelling on my cheek from Amelia's slap had completely faded. And so, beneath the gaze of family and guests, surrounded by fragrance, I calmly shared our second kiss with him. My rough hands were hidden inside my gloves. All in all, it was not too bad. At last, the clamor and tediousness of the wedding finally came to an end. Well then, she murmured to the empty room. Her long brown hair spread across the white sheets. Her body sank into a softness unlike anything she had ever experienced, as though she were lying on a cloud. Just as she was about to drift into sleep, a faint sound of footsteps came from the doorway. My new bride certainly has some nerve, doesn't she? His low voice, touched with amusement, sounded in the quiet room. Claire stiffened all over and sat bolt upright in bed. I am sorry, she blurted in panic. It's all right. Irel's tone remained warm. Please, make yourself at ease. Relax. For the next year, I look forward to working with you. He spoke in a manner that was both formal and friendly. This year is a very important one for the person I love to be together with the one she loves. The dresses I ordered for you will arrive tomorrow. You must be exhausted today, so get some rest. He rose naturally and added, you may use this bed however you like. Claire immediately panicked at that. The bed is too large for me alone. I'll sleep in the study. But Lord Irel's next words stunned her. Don't worry, I would never let a lady sleep on the sofa. As if he had read her mind, he added, for the sake of my pride, please use it. His tone permitted no argument, yet carried a gentleman's thoughtfulness. Good night. Lord Irel nodded to her, then turned and left the bedroom. The door closed softly with a light click. Just being able to lie beside the person he loved was already a beautiful thing. She remembered the words Lord Irel had said to her during the day. They still seemed to echo by her ear. A thought she had never once entertained before quietly sprouted in the field of her heart like a tiny seed. Someday, would there be someone who loved me like that too? The next day, she was awakened by a soft knock at the door. Claire slowly opened her eyes. Bright sunlight had already poured in through the gap in the curtains. Madam, came a maid's voice from outside the door. It's already past noon. If you still feel tired, would you like to rest a little longer? No, I'm fine. Claire immediately sat up. I'll get up and change right away. When a maid opened the wardrobe, she froze for a moment at the sight of the few old garments inside, some even patched. Will the rest of your luggage be sent over later? The maid asked carefully. Claire shook her head and answered calmly, no, that's everything I own. She paused, then added, there isn't much. I can organize it myself. I don't need your help. The maid's gaze lingered on those shabby clothes, and there was an unmistakable note of surprise in her voice. Madam plans to wear these? Is there a problem? Claire asked in return. And no, nothing. It's just. The maid hesitated before finally saying it. The former Duchess always dressed properly and was impeccably put together, so I was a little surprised. Though the maid's expression remained respectful, Claire could still read the trace of scrutiny and doubt in her eyes. Claire drew a deep breath and quietly steeled herself. I had better prepare myself. As the mistress of this household, the road ahead is unlikely to be smooth. When she arrived in the grand hall, all the servants were already lined up there waiting. At the front stood a sharp-looking middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard. Good morning, madam. Led by him, all the servants bowed to her in unison, their voices ringing through the hall. The man at the front straightened with a professional smile. Good morning, madam. I am the steward entrusted with managing this estate. Claire nodded and asked, Steward, may I ask your name? The steward gave a faintly condescending smile and answered in a lofty tone, Madam, there is no need for you to remember. In a house this large, names are unimportant. Claire silently mocked him in her heart. I see. Then I look forward to working with you in the future. If possible, I would like to learn about the affairs of the estate. Before she could finish, the steward interrupted her with a smile. Madam, there is nothing you need to do. We will take care of everything. He gave a slight bow. Please simply enjoy your time in your room. That smile and tone conveyed only one message. You are merely an ornament. Please do not interfere in anything. Yet when Claire looked up, a faint smile curved her lips, carrying the slightest trace of sly amusement. This actually suits me just fine. Madam, the older steward said in a warm and respectful tone, you need do nothing at all. Claire stood there in a somewhat plain, mint green dress, looking slightly out of place in this magnificent hall that resembled a palace. That is what they say, but I should still get familiar with the layout of this estate as soon as possible. She made up her mind. I really can't sit around doing nothing. Back at home, I lived almost like a servant. From dawn to dusk, there was always another load of laundry to wash. Because of all that endless rough work, my hands are still rough to this day. But, she murmured softly, her voice trembling with a hint of hope, if I stay here, perhaps I can finally have hands worthy of being a duchess. Just then, from around the corner of the corridor, came a few deliberately lowered whispers. Did you see her? That pitiful little noble lady doesn't suit our master at all. That wrinkled dress. Everything about her clashes with the ducal residence. And she only brought 5 plain dresses in her luggage. She's probably waiting for his grace to buy her new clothes. Poor people with bloodlines always use tricks like that. A laugh followed. If she hears you, we might get kicked out. One maid nervously pressed a finger to her lips. Relax. Another maid curled her lip carelessly. She's staring into space like always. True enough. Claire merely sighed inwardly. She silently told herself and quickened her pace, leaving those filthy words behind. Not worth arguing with them. Ignore it. Passing through the corridor, she pushed open a glass door leading to the courtyard. Bright sunlight instantly poured down and swept away the gloom in her heart. Still, this place is astonishingly large. Even the garden is maintained so perfectly. It's impressive. She walked along the pebble path, filled with admiration. It was hard to imagine how the mistresses of previous generations had managed an estate of such scale. She could not help thinking of her mother-in-law, whom she had met only once at the wedding. If only I could ask Mother for more guidance about this place. But who knows when I will see her again? A faint regret stirred in Claire's heart. Just as she was lost in thought, the sound of vigorous scrubbing and splashing water pulled her back to reality. She looked toward the noise. Not far away, at the open-air washyard, a maid in uniform was kneeling beside a massive wooden tub, desperately scrubbing sheets as water splashed everywhere. Claire approached, intending to ask about it. The maid hurriedly tried to stand, apologizing in a fluster. I'm very sorry. I'll be done soon. But when she turned around, she froze at the unexpected face before her. The maid stared blankly. The lady in the mint green dress before her had beautiful brown hair and gentle eyes. My name is Claire. A warm smile appeared on Claire's face. There was not the slightest arrogance of a noble lady in her manner. Igriegagis. The maid looked at her helplessly and stammered out her name. And my name is May. Claire softly repeated it, sincere approval in her eyes. What a lovely name. Smiling, she asked, May, do you always wash this much clothing alone? May lowered her head somewhat dejectedly and explained quietly, today's amount is especially large. Several of the young ladies' uniforms got dirty, and I'm too clumsy, so it's taken me a long time. Claire looked at the mountain of laundry nearly overflowing from the tub. Even so, this is far too much for one person. Then Claire suddenly said, May, igriegagis. May answered nervously, would you mind if I helped you? The question left May completely stunned. She thought she had heard wrong. A duchess wanted to help a maid wash clothes? It was utterly absurd. How could I possibly? May hurriedly shook her head, but Claire gave her no chance to hesitate. Then it settled, under May's shocked gaze. Claire took off her shoes, rolled up her skirt, and without the slightest hesitation stepped one bare foot into the large wooden tub full of soapy water. Like this, standing steadily in the tub, Claire stepped on the heavy bedsheets with her feet and looked back at the dumbstruck made by the stool. If you scrub while stepping on them, it's much more efficient. As she trod on the clothes, she added lightly, there's no need to wash the clothes of people who treat you badly too carefully. Besides, she blinked. If the two of us do it together, we'll finish quickly, right? May's eyes instantly grew hot, tears rising at once. She looked at Claire's outstretched hand and that sincere, warm smile, and for a moment she could not say a word. She could only nod with all her strength, choking out, thank you, madam. Claire and May, one a duchess, the other an ordinary maid, stood together in the large wooden tub, happily stepping on the laundry. Soap bubbles flew, laughter rang out, and even the heavy work somehow became lighter. As they talked, Claire gradually learned the situation. I see. So the one assigning all the work is the head, maid named Saloun. Claire asked casually while stepping on the sheets. Why, yes. May replied softly, fear evident when she said that name. According to May, she had been working here for half a year, but the head maid had disliked her from the very beginning and forced her every day to handle an unreasonable amount of laundry. All right, this is the last piece. Claire shook the water from her hands, a satisfied smile on her face. Yes, thanks to Lady Claire, we finished early. A long-lost bright smile bloomed across May's face, genuinely from the heart. She looked at Claire excitedly. I'm really very. Before she could finish her grateful words, the smile on her face suddenly froze. Her eyes fixed straight behind Claire, and she stammered out a few sounds. What is it? Claire asked in confusion, following May's gaze as she turned around. A familiar voice came from not far away, carrying a helpless smile. Dear. He walked toward her, his gaze falling on Claire's bare feet and the damp hem of her dress. I looked everywhere and couldn't find you. He stopped, his tone tinged with teasing. What are you doing here? Irel's sudden appearance threw Claire into instant panic. Claire only wanted to escape this awkward situation as quickly as possible. In her fluster, she lifted a foot, trying to climb out of the wooden tub. The slippery soap beneath her made her foot slide, and she lost her balance, falling backward. Careful! Irel's voice carried a note of urgency. In the next instant, before Claire could hit the ground, he moved in one swift step and caught her firmly in his arms with strong, outstretched hands. His low voice sounded by her ear. Can you explain what you were doing just now? A little later, in the drawing room, her mildly twisted ankle had already been wrapped in bandages. I'm very sorry about what just happened. Claire broke the silence first, lowering her head, unable to meet Irel's eyes. Then she looked up again. I didn't know you would come back. Do you usually return this early? Irel's gaze fell on the boxes that had just been moved in, and his usual composed expression returned. The newly ordered dresses arrived today, he answered. Claire looked up. Then wouldn't your presence alone have been enough? In other words, he had no need to leave work early for something like that. At that, Irel revealed a helpless yet radiant smile. That was just an excuse. The others drove me out and said, You're newlyweds. Go keep your wife company. His gaze fell on her again, carrying a searching smile. So, what exactly were you doing in the garden just now? I was only giving a little guidance about the laundry work. She made up a clumsy excuse guiltily. Only giving guidance? Irel clearly did not believe her. But you looked very happy. Claire's heart dropped. I'm done for. I can't believe I got caught red-handed. How careless. Alarm bells rang in her mind. If this makes him think I'm unfit to be a duchess, I'm finished. At that moment, the head maid, Saloun, appeared in the drawing room. Her hands were folded in front of her, her expression stern, her eyes full of open reproach. Considering your status, Saloun said in a rigid tone, you truly should avoid such unbecoming behavior. No, that's not right. It's my fault. A trembling, urgent voice cut her off. It was May. Somehow, the young maid had summoned the courage to rush before everyone, her face tense. Lady Claire, no, madam. May was so nervous she stumbled over her words, but she still shouted with all her strength in defense. If madam hadn't come to help me, I never would have finished my work. So madam did nothing wrong. Everyone present was stunned by those words. Claire was even more completely frozen in place. She looked at the frail girl defending her in disbelief. Why? Her mind was in chaos. Why is this girl speaking up for me? We only just met. By all rights, she should have sided with the headmaid. In an instant, scenes from the past came rushing back like a flood. Her stepmother's cruel mockery, the noble's contemptuous looks. In all the years when she had been isolated and bullied, never once had someone stood up to protect her like this. And yet now, looking at May's face, flushed red with urgency, Claire's heart was full of indescribable emotion. In this place where I have no allies at all, she is trying to protect me. May's trembling but steadfast voice struck Claire's heart like a heavy hammer. She had intended to let it pass. Endure for now, and the storm will pass. That had been the rule of survival she had learned over the last 20 years. But before Claire could speak, the old steward stepped forward first. With quiet authority, he looked at the headmaid. Saloun, May has spoken clearly. Madam did nothing wrong. Did Madam force her to wash the clothes herself? Washing clothes is not a crime, is it? What exactly is the problem? Confronted by both their questions, Saloun's face darkened, but she still straightened her back and argued in an unyielding tone, it damages the dignity of the ducal household. That place was never meant to be seen by outsiders. She was referring to the washyard. The solution is very simple. Claire's gaze swept across all the servants present before landing on Irel's face. Her tone was calm, but unquestionable. As long as everyone keeps their mouth shut. She even added, that includes you, dear. Irel blinked slightly, then understood her meaning and silently laughed to himself. Of course I wouldn't tell anyone my wife was doing laundry. So if this matter spreads, that means someone in this household has failed to behave with proper decorum. Her words were like a sharp sword, striking directly at the head maid's weakest point, the so-called decorum and dignity she prided herself on most. For a servant, that should be unacceptable, shouldn't it? A faint smile curved Claire's lips as she asked softly in return, "Am I wrong?" Saloun's face instantly went pale. Looking at this sharp-tongued, commanding new mistress, she finally realized that she had utterly misjudged this seemingly delicate noble lady. Faced with overwhelming logic and status, she had no choice but to bow her proud head. "Yes, madam." It seemed as if the small disturbance was about to subside. Iroh looked at Claire with a gentle smile and suggested, "Shall we let this matter end here?" To everyone's surprise, Claire calmly refused. Meeting Iroh's slightly astonished gaze, she said, "Could you give me a little more time?" Iroh looked at the wife before him, so insistent on her position, and finally nodded. "Of course. They tried so hard to protect me just now." Claire told herself inwardly, "I can't let this end like that." Actually, Claire turned to Iroh and began to state her thoughts. "I spent the entire day touring this estate by myself. Entirely by myself. By yourself," Iroh repeated. "Everyone seems very busy, and that made me realize how difficult it must be to manage such a large estate. Many of the staff are experienced. I believe they are reliable. You only need to make the important decisions." Following his words, Claire asked in a tone of innocent sincerity, "So I won't need to help with the laundry from now on?" Iroh laughed. He closed his eyes, his face completely relaxed and amused. "That's right. Leave those things to others. May I ask the steward over there?" Claire's voice turned serious. "Who is responsible for assigning everyone's duties?" The old steward answered without hesitation, gesturing to the head made beside him. "That would be Saloun." Saloun's body stiffened involuntarily. "I understand." Claire nodded. Then in a tone that belonged unmistakably to the mistress of the house, she issued her first order. "Starting tomorrow, have someone else handle the laundry work." Headmaid Saloun's face instantly turned deathly pale. All the calm dignity she prided herself on crumbled in that moment. "What?" Her voice trembled slightly in shock. "I have served as headmaid here for so many years. What I would like to ask," Claire said, "is why you assigned so much work to a newcomer alone." Saloun's eyes flickered, and a fine layer of cold sweat appeared at her temples. She stammered, "That was because the plan was for the others to help her after finishing their own tasks." In Claire's mind instantly flashed the images of the two maids whispering in the corridor and judging her at their leisure. They certainly had not looked as though they intended to help at all. "With so many employees, delegating work must be very difficult for you," Claire said, her tone full of sympathy. "You must be under tremendous pressure." "That's not." Saloun began to protest, but Claire cut her off gently. "You should take a period of rest." At that moment, the employees from the dress salon arrived. Looking at Claire, Iroh instead felt a wave of relief. It seems this estate can be managed quite well. "May." His gaze passed over the others. "Could you stay behind for a moment?" Claire asked. "May become my personal maid?" Iroh replied, "No problem." "Then it's settled." Afterward, Iroh thought to himself, "She's not merely brave. She's extraordinary." Just then, someone called out, "Iroh, sneaking off to loaf around again?" Iroh raised his eyes and looked at the familiar face before him, a face practically stamped with the word trouble. He flatly said a name. Keith. Keith's full name was Keith Valona, the younger brother of the current king, and also one of Iroh's few close friends. "You've got some nerve saying that to me." A sly light glittered in Keith's golden eyes as he stepped closer and mercilessly exposed his friend's secret thoughts. "Ever since you got married, you've had that stupid grin plastered all over your face." Iroh subconsciously lifted a hand to touch his own face. Somewhat uncomfortable, he asked back, "Do I really look that ridiculous?" "Yes," Keith answered without the slightest mercy. His tone carried a trace of teasing and probing. "It's only a one-year contract marriage, right? If that foolish look on your face is all just an act, then I ought to stand up and applaud you." "And no, it's not like that," Iroh admitted frankly. "She's just far more interesting than I expected." That answer clearly stirred Keith's curiosity. He recalled the new Duchess, whom he had only met once at the wedding. "When I saw her at the wedding, she looked quite quiet. That was what I thought at first too. But it turns out she's quite a wild person. So that's why she makes you so happy," the prince pressed, his eyes full of gossip. "Do you remember why I left early yesterday? Guess what I saw when I got home? I called for her at the door to her room, but there was no answer. I searched the entire manor and couldn't find her." Keith raised a brow, a flash of dramatic concern passing through his eyes. "Don't tell me she ran away." "No, she was doing laundry." "What?" The amused expression on Keith's face froze instantly. "She was barefoot, just standing in a huge wash basin, stepping on the clothes." Iroh even found himself imitating the motion, his face lit with pure delight. Keith looked utterly incredulous. A noble lady was doing laundry? I've never heard of such a thing. Exactly. Iroh laughed, and the smile came from the heart. I had never seen anything like it either. And she even made that demon woman trained by Saloun shut her mouth. You mean that old witch, had made Saloun? Keith's expression grew complicated. We got scolded by her plenty when we were kids. He looked at Iroh, eyes full of astonishment. Your wife handled her? Yes, she did. Iroh's answer carried a faint, barely noticeable pride. That's impressive, Keith said sincerely. Then his tone turned more serious. You better keep a close eye on her. Don't let her really run away. Of course. Iroh's voice calmed, but in those green eyes flashed a cold, unquestionable resolve. If anyone tries to hurt her, I'll make them regret it. But honestly, he added, his tone filled with complete admiration, she has nerves of steel. I don't think she really needs excessive protection. After hearing Iroh's story, Keith's interest deepened. He chuckled and said with clear curiosity, now I really want to meet her in person. You'll have the chance. Iroh's tone was mild, yet carried a certainty that could not be challenged. Then I'll look forward to it. Keith stood up, adjusted his slightly open collar, and strolled toward the door with easy grace. As Iroh watched his friend leave, silence returned to the study. Claire really was a strange woman. By the time Claire came back to the drawing room, it had already turned into a temporary luxurious dress salon. Iroh stood to one side. I had them bring over some things that might suit you first, he said to Claire. Just choose whatever styles you like. I can wear anything, Claire said softly. To her, simply having new clothes to wear was already an immense blessing. How could she dare be picky? Take your time choosing, Your Grace. But your figure is rather slender, so I'm afraid all of them will need to be taken in a little, the dressmaker said with a smile. Iroh looked at Claire in surprise. They already fit quite well. They still need altering? Please rest assured, the dressmaker explained professionally. Taking something in is much faster than letting fabric out. Claire, he suggested, how about wearing one of them when we dine together tonight? Ah, Claire looked surprised and instinctively glanced at the gorgeous dresses beside her. Iroh noticed her hesitation and added thoughtfully, if you don't want to, I won't force you. And no, that's not it. Claire hurriedly shook her head and explained awkwardly, I'm afraid I'll dirty the new clothes. Iroh couldn't help laughing. These aren't formal gowns. It's fine. And if there aren't enough, we can always buy more. But even if I have so many, I won't really have anywhere to wear them, Claire muttered quietly. Soon you'll be receiving invitations piled as high as mountains, Iroh said with certainty. When that happens, you'll find you need even more dresses than you imagine. Oh, really? Claire nodded half understanding, but she still felt an overwhelming sense of unreality. After a short rest, Iroh lounged lazily on an elegantly shaped chaise, arms folded, eyes closed. Then he heard Claire's voice from not far away. May, could you put that dress away carefully? Quietly, he opened his eyes, just a slit. Your Grace, do you like that one? May asked. Iroh saw that May was holding an orange dress, while Claire stood beside her, her gaze full of affection and reluctance. Every single one is beautiful, Claire said with a trace of wonder. So beautiful that I can hardly bear to wear them. I just want to keep them safe. May's face showed a cute, slightly reproachful expression. If you do that, the dresses will be sad. This is the first time. Claire's voice was almost too soft to hear, as if she were speaking to herself. What did you say? May asked curiously. This is the first time I've ever received a new dress. Even though my family is a marquee house, we've always been poor. Claire wore a bitter little smile, as if she were recounting a story that had nothing to do with her. I always took the usable parts from my mother's and sister's old dresses and pieced clothes together for myself. Understanding dawned on May's face. She remembered the maids whispering about the Duchess behind her back. She remembered the small suitcase that held only 5 plain dresses. I see, Iroh thought from where he listened. I kept altering and patching them, and over time my sewing actually became quite good. So this feels very strange now. Claire smiled, and the corners of her eyes seemed to glow. That dress fits my body perfectly. A dress made only for me. Iroh looked at her quietly. If she was really that happy, then this was how she ought to smile, he thought. I had always thought that courteous, distant smile was always on her face. Maybe next time I should have one custom-made for her. The thought surfaced without warning. Looking at her slender figure and contented smile, an unfamiliar warmth welled up in his heart. Does this feeling resemble having a younger sister? That's right, he told himself, just like a little sister. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the giant floor-to-ceiling windows. Yet at what should have been lunchtime, there was nothing in front of her. "No lunch?" Claire asked in surprise. "Your Grace." May hurried over and bowed deeply, her face full of panic and guilt. "I'm so sorry." She looked like she was about to cry, stumbling over her explanation. "I was bringing your lunch, and I accidentally bumped into another maid, and then you dropped it, right?" Claire calmly finished for her. "Yes." May lowered her head in dejection. "And the kitchen doesn't have time to prepare another one." "I understand," Claire said softly. "Actually, this works out perfectly. To be honest, I ate too much at breakfast." Claire comforted her in an easy tone. "I was just worrying that I wouldn't be able to eat lunch anyway. So tea will be enough for me now." "Yeah, tea I can definitely bring without anyone interfering," May said with sudden resolve. Then she bowed deeply again. "I'll be right back. Please wait a moment." With that, she turned like a gust of wind and hurried out. "I see. So now they're using starvation tactics." Claire had already expected things would not end so easily. Punishing Salon yesterday had indeed triggered a huge chain reaction. The obvious sneers and malicious gossip had disappeared. Now they had started using this underhanded trick instead. A cold curve touched her lips. If they were only targeting me, I could handle it. But she could not allow May to be dragged into it because of her. "Just as I thought," May said softly to Claire while setting the tea service on the table. "Tea is the only thing I can bring out safely. I'll pour it for you now." But Claire keenly noticed the slight redness around May's eyes beneath her forced smile. Her eyes are red. Claire's heart sank. So even bringing a cup of tea was a hard-fought battle for her. So while I didn't know it, May has been fighting for me all this time. Looking at the girl before her, who seemed even frielier than herself, Claire suddenly spoke. "Would you like to have a cup with me?" The suggestion stunned May. She shook her head frantically, her face full of disbelief. "I've never heard of a maid drinking tea with her mistress." Claire gave her a playful look. "I don't mind." But May stubbornly shook her head. "But I do mind." Seeing her so serious, Claire did not insist. She simply rested her chin in her hands and smiled as May served her. Claire's thoughts drifted instantly back to her distant childhood. Her grandmother had often brewed tea like this for her. She had loved it in that cold home, filled with scheming and malice. Her grandmother had been the only person who had truly loved her. "Well?" May looked at her expectantly and asked softly. Claire showed a completely satisfied, happy smile. "It's wonderful. Tea made especially for me really does warm the heart." She looked at the girl who was thinking of her. Then Claire suddenly said, "Next time." Her purple eyes glimmered with gentle light. "I'll teach you an even better way to brew tea." "Really?" May's eyes lit up instantly with expectation. Claire nodded firmly. "Yes. When that time comes, we'll sit down and have tea together properly. I'll work hard," May said excitedly, clenching her fists. "I heard she's the illegitimate daughter of some noble, but she really is a kind girl. You'd never imagine she had suffered too." Just then, an ill-timed sound shattered the warm atmosphere. Claire's stomach let out a loud, unmistakable protest. The smile on her face froze instantly. Her expression darkened. "They're not just tampering with my meals. They're trying to starve May to death, too." Claire looked at her and felt a wave of helplessness. I wish she would tell me about the wrongs she suffered. But perhaps keeping silent is how she preserves her dignity. Claire set down her teacup, put her proper smile back in place, and suggested, "Shall we take a walk? A little fresh air might help." Wearing that brand new orange dress, Claire walked among the flowers. Behind her, May said, "Please don't worry too much. If the dress gets a little dusty, it'll wash out easily." "I know, but I still feel nervous wearing something this pretty." Claire sighed inwardly in exasperation. "I was the one who suggested coming out for a walk, and now all I can think about is the dress. Honestly, what is wrong with me?" The sunlight in the garden was perfect, edging every blooming rose with a warm rim of gold. Walking among the flowers, Claire sincerely marveled at the sight before her. These roses are breathtakingly beautiful, surrounded by that dazzling sea of red blossoms. One could almost forget every trouble, forget the awkward position one was in. After that, Iril seemed busier than ever before. He left the residence and did not return for several days. And with his absence, the unseen malice grew more brazen. At first, it was only lunchtime accidents. Gradually, even dinner somehow started failing to reach her room. In the end, they stopped bringing her meals altogether. This treatment reminded her of Amelia. Even if she told the Duke, even if he truly intervened, he would only punish those responsible. But that would not fundamentally solve anything. May said tearfully, "Then we'll just have to come up with a plan ourselves." Claire comforted her. "If we don't, we really might starve." May apologized instead. She had dragged Claire into all the trouble connected to her. Serving her had been May's own choice, even if perhaps To Claire, she was only a burden. Claire told her it was all right. You're my strength now, strong enough that I truly want to strike back. I never knew it could feel this reassuring, having someone stand beside you like this. For May's sake too, she had to resolve this situation quickly. After a night of chaotic thoughts, Claire finally sat at the absurdly long dining table in the Iroh ducal residence. At last, breakfast. Looking at the abundant food before her, Claire's stomach let out a faint growl at the wrong moment. This was the first proper meal she had had since yesterday morning. She thought silently, if I eat my fill now, maybe I can hold out until tomorrow's breakfast. But then a thought flashed through her mind, and the hand holding her cutlery paused. But what about May? While she was lost in thought, a gentle voice came from across from her. Don't you like that bread? Should I have them bring out something else? Duke Iroh, no, not at all. Claire immediately came back to herself, and a flawless, gentle smile swiftly spread across her face. In an almost exaggerated tone, she said, it looks so delicious that I feel like I could eat an entire basket. I'm glow. A smile touched Iroh's lips. As he looked at her, there was a trace of scrutiny in his gaze. Eat as much as you like. You're a little too thin, Claire. Claire said, I'm not very used to getting up early. I don't have much appetite right after waking. If I take a few pieces of bread back to my room, would that be all right? Of course. He answered almost immediately. Iroh nodded in satisfaction and was just about to call a servant. Then, no need. I'll take them myself. She had only one unwavering thought in her heart. On this one matter alone, I cannot compromise. If I leave this to the servants, it will never reach May. After the little breakfast incident was dealt with, Iroh and Claire walked side by side through the corridor of the main hall. Have you gotten used to this house yet? Iroh asked. Claire tilted her head slightly and answered politely, yes. I don't get lost anymore. That's good. A satisfied smile curled at Iroh's lips. The gardens here are especially beautiful as the seasons change. If you have time, you should take more walks there. A ripple stirred in Claire's heart. She paused, then said softly, Your Grace, you always seem to be busy with work. I heard you worked late again last night. Yes. Iroh smiled a little sheepishly. When I concentrate, it's easy for me to lose track of time. He saw the soft smile in her purple eyes as she said in a near murmur, You don't always have to look so cautious and apologetic. Lowering her eyes to hide the complicated feelings within them, Claire spoke in the concerned tone expected of a wife. Please don't overwork yourself. If you feel you can, please try to come home earlier. After saying that, she took her leave. Only after watching Iroh go did Claire withdraw her gaze. Looking down at the still warm bread in her arms, she took a deep breath, stopped hesitating, and turned toward the servants' quarters. She stopped before a plain door and gently pushed it open. May, Claire said, her voice firm yet gentle, let's eat. Why, Your Grace? The maid named May shot to her feet, eyes full of disbelief. Look, I brought breakfast back. Let's eat it together. Claire held out the tray in her hands. The golden brown bread on it gave off an enticing aroma. But I'm only a maid. I can't eat your food. May, looking at her pale face, Claire asked bluntly, You didn't get any food again today, did you? Teach, that's only because I cleaned too slowly. May lowered her head, trying to cover it up with a weak excuse. Don't say that. Claire's voice held a gentle firmness that would not allow argument. She stepped closer and brought the tray nearer to May. If you don't eat, you'll have no strength. Besides, there's too much for me to finish alone. May stared blankly at the bread in her hands. Warmth spread through her palms from its soft heat, as though it had been a very long time since she had felt such warmth. Hesitantly, she lifted it to her mouth and took a small, careful bite. A suppressed sob slipped from her throat. Tears as large as pearls rolled down without warning and fell onto the bread in her hands. Crying as she ate, she devoured it desperately, as if trying to swallow all her hunger and humiliation with it. It's really good, she sobbed thickly, tears and food mixing together into a taste too complicated to describe. Oh, May. Claire looked at her quietly, her violet eyes filled with heartache and a trace of sorrow. In May, she seemed to see her former self. She too had lived through days of exclusion, neglect, and going hungry. From the clock at the end of the corridor came a steady click, click. In that moment, time itself seemed heavy with meaning. Claire took a deep breath and made up her mind. May, she began, her voice calm and firm. I'm a little hungry, Claire said softly. It was less a statement of fact than a test. As expected, May's whole body immediately tensed. She lowered her head in panic, her voice trembling. Yes, I'm very sorry now. This isn't your fault, Claire soothed her at once. I didn't mean it that way. If I were a little more capable. May's voice grew smaller and smaller, full of self-reproach. In an instant, buried memories surged back like a black tide. Back at home, going without food had been commonplace. She remembered her stepmother Amelia, her spiteful face and petty torment. Those endless, malicious little punishments. Whenever hunger became truly unbearable, I would sneak into the kitchen in the middle of the night. In her memory, that lonely, battered figure searched the cold kitchen by moonlight in a miserable scramble for anything to fill her stomach. That's it. A thought flashed through her mind like lightning, illuminating every difficulty. May! She turned around, and her violet eyes shone with a light brighter than ever before. Grasping May's hands excitedly, she said, I just thought of a brilliant idea. A brilliant idea? Startled by her sudden action, May looked at her blankly. Sitting here and waiting for other people to toss us food is completely absurd. Claire's voice rang with strength and resolve. Straightening her back, she broke into a bright, confident smile and solemnly declared, I'll cook. Night had fallen over the Irel ducal residence. In a vast kitchen, large enough for dozens of people to work at once, only two slender shadows were cast across the cold floor by the moonlight. Why, Your Grace? Are you really going to cook personally? May followed close behind Claire. Claire turned back and gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, she said lightly. I can manage some simple dishes just fine. If you're worried, May, would you like to try? But May said, and no. Without permission, I absolutely can't use the kitchen supplies. Even in a situation like this, May would not overstep her place or interfere with the cook's work. No matter her position, she did her utmost to remain sincere and respectful. Claire comforted her. Then I'll cook. After all, I'm the mistress of this house. But Your Grace, May still looked full of worry. What if you get hurt by the fire or the knives? Claire's smile did not change. She turned her face slightly, her tone calm, yet carrying a chilling decisiveness. That would still be better than starving to death. Bubbling softly, the vegetable soup in the small pot steamed over the fire, filling the air with a warm fragrance. Claire stood at the stove, a potato in one hand and a small knife in the other, skillfully cutting it into bite-sized pieces. Her movements were smooth and natural, without the slightest awkwardness one might expect from a noble lady. May stood to the side, staring blankly. At first she had been shocked. Your Grace, you're actually going to cook yourself. Watching the ingredients simmer in the pot and Claire's skillful knife work, May couldn't help whispering, but you're really good at it, right? Claire turned back and gave her a playful wink, her smile bright. I used to make lots of simple dishes. You know, her voice softened, touched by a faint, hard-to-catch remoteness. When I was still at home, there was a time they didn't let me eat for 3 whole days. The night was dark as ink, and fragments of memory drifted within it. I held out until the evening of the 3rd day, she said in that distant voice. But then, all at once, I understood something. Why should I suffer like that? Goodness. May breathed softly, eyes full of concern. She was completely drawn into the story. Claire came back to herself and gave May a relieved smile. So that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I found every bit of food in the house that could be eaten. The scene replayed in her mind. She sat at the table with food she had stolen. Hardly a feast, but a feast to her nonetheless. I cried while I ate. It was delicious. Recalling it, she wore a slightly mischievous smile. As I ate, I kept imagining the looks on their faces the next day when they discovered nothing was left. That's too awful. And they were still your family, weren't they? May sounded on the verge of tears, heart aching for all the wrongs her mistress had suffered. The word family doesn't always mean what you think it does. Claire's tone was very calm, but it carried endless weariness. You're amazing, Your Grace, May said sincerely. All this time, you've been fighting alone. She lowered her head, guilt filling her voice. I feel so pathetic. Clenching her hands, she summoned the courage to tell her own story. When my mother died, I had no idea what to do. Right before she passed, she told me about my father. I held on to that one hope and went to find him, but all he did was give me this job and then leave. May's voice caught. Since then, I've truly been all alone. I've always been so afraid. Claire stopped what she was doing. I understand that fear of having no one to rely on, that terror of possibly starving to death. Claire's gaze rested on May, full of determination and gentleness. But don't worry, as long as I'm here, I promise you'll never go hungry again. Your Grace. May's tears could no longer be restrained and fell like broken strings of pearls. There, don't cry. Pull yourself together. Claire reached out and gently wiped the tears from May's face with her fingertips, a mischievous smile appearing on her own. Want to know the secret to making food taste even better? Tearful and curious, May looked at her. What is it? Claire leaned in as if sharing a tremendous secret and said brightly, you sing while you cook. And so, for the first time, a light-hearted song drifted through the great kitchen. It was a melody without words, like birds in the woods or a mountain stream, clear and cheerful, tinting even the fragrance of the vegetable soup with delight. The notes seemed like tiny winged spirits slipping out through the crack of the kitchen door and floating into the silent corridors. What a lovely tune, May thought dreamily, hands clasped before her chest. I really feel like the food tastes better already. I'm glad you like it. Claire stopped singing, opened her eyes, and said in a lively tone, I made it up on the spot. Wow, that's amazing. May's eyes were full of admiration. Maybe one day I could become a singer, Claire joked, gesturing with the soup ladle in the air. Make a little money singing and travel the world. But May said urgently, if you left, the Duke would be heartbroken. Claire froze, and so did the smile on her face. She turned back, puzzled. What do you mean? Claire asked, completely unable to follow May's logic. But before May could answer, a tall figure was already standing in the kitchen doorway. It was Duke Irel. Behind him, the burly head chef and another female steward stared with their eyes wide, nearly dropping their jaws. Their faces screamed one thing only, ultimate horror that the Duchess was in the kitchen, singing and cooking. Good heavens, Your Grace, you're back. Claire barely found her voice and forced out a smile uglier than a grimace. Inside, she was screaming madly. Why did it have to be now? Calm down, Claire kept warning herself. At the same time, she did her best to press a dignified, proper smile onto her face. She was still holding the soup-splattered ladle in her hand, as if it were a hot weapon. I'm terribly sorry I was unable to greet you at the entrance. She dipped into a flawless curtsy before Irel. No, it's all right. Irel waved a hand, apparently unconcerned with such formalities. His gaze finally fell on the steaming pot. More importantly, what exactly is going on here? I am cooking, Claire answered frankly. At this point, pretending otherwise was meaningless. I can see that. The corners of Irel's lips lifted into an attractive curve. The two of you seem to be having a lot of fun. But don't we have cooks in this house? Why are you the one cooking? The question landed like a thunderclap, turning the head chef and female steward paler than paper. Claire immediately spoke up, tried to take the matter onto herself. Well, I didn't see any kitchen staff around, so I thought I'd do it myself. Irel's brows drew together slightly. His sharp gaze swept toward the two servants. What happened? I'm not sure what you mean. Your Grace, the female steward said in a trembling voice. The head chef was sweating profusely as he rushed to explain, Your Grace, we did try to stop the Duchess. We told her we would handle the meal, but Her Grace simply took over the kitchen. I'm very sorry, Claire said softly, her violet eyes shimmering with a layer of moisture. But I haven't eaten since this morning. I was just too hungry, so I simply used the kitchen. Irel's eyes instantly sharpened. Turning his head slightly, he asked with scrutiny in his gaze, Since this morning? Then what about lunch? At the word lunch, Claire looked as though she had heard some fantastical absurdity. She lifted her head, her face full of genuine, unfeigned confusion. Lunch? She murmured. This house serves lunch? Irel's gaze rested for a moment on Claire's face, so full of pure surprise. Then a deep light flashed in his eyes. He spoke, his voice not loud, but every word was like a sharp icicle in winter, striking each person's ears clearly. Who will explain this? The head chef and female steward lowered their heads even further, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. What does this mean? He repeated, his cold gaze sweeping over the row of servants with bowed heads and shaking shoulders. Who can explain this to me? At that tense, explosive moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Please wait. Everyone turned toward the sound and saw Claire holding an empty plate in one hand and a ladle in the other, wearing a gentle, composed smile. The food is going to get cold. Tilting her head, she proposed lightly, couldn't we discuss this after we eat? Irel and Claire sat facing each other. On the long table were several simple, steaming homemade dishes, in striking contrast with the luxurious surroundings. The servants who should have been under interrogation now stood rigidly beside the table, hardly daring to breathe. Looking at the clearly extra portion in front of him, Irel asked uncertainly, Am I allowed to eat my portion too? I made plenty, so it's completely fine. Claire answered without the least concern and had already begun elegantly enjoying her own dinner. Irel picked up his knife and fork and cut into a steak. This steak is rather thick. He looked at the piece of meat on his fork in surprise. Claire, meanwhile, had already narrowed her eyes in bliss, putting a tender, juicy bite of beef in her mouth, her face full of pure satisfaction. I've always wanted to eat meat eat in big mouthfuls like this. She cheered inwardly, as though all the old grievances of hunger were finally being repaid in this one bite. But when she lifted a spoonful of soup to her mouth, her movement paused slightly. The soup tastes very mild. Setting down the spoon, Iroh gracefully dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin and suddenly said, "I understand now. Everyone really is considerate of me." Claire, nibbling at her bread, looked up in confusion. "They've all been urging me to come home earlier," Iroh added. She stared at him in shock. "Wait, you heard our conversation? From when?" An image flashed through Claire's mind at once. Iroh's smiling face secretly peeking through the crack in the kitchen door. The scene froze exactly at the moment she had said the secret to making food taste better. You could have stopped me before I said all of that." Claire's cheeks instantly turned scarlet. She lowered her head in embarrassment, wishing she could bury her face in her plate. "This is so humiliating. I want to crawl into a hole." "You look like you were having fun," Iroh said, his tone touched with an easy smile, with no intention of blaming her at all. "I didn't expect you to come back so early," Claire muttered softly, trying to defend her lapse. "That's because this morning," Iroh said matter-of-factly as he looked at her, "didn't you say you felt lonely and hoped I would come back earlier?" "Did I really say that?" Claire was completely stunned. "And besides," Iroh continued, confirming her suspicion, "everyone has been telling me lately to come home earlier too. It's probably because we're newlyweds. They keep urging me over and over." "I see. They really did mean well." Claire lowered her head, hiding the sharp gleam that flashed through her eyes. "Thanks to them, I may be able to end these absurd days of having my food withheld sooner than expected." Her mind was suddenly crystal clear. "I could have gone straight to the Duke and complained, but that would never have fully conveyed how terrible the situation was. Nothing speaks more clearly than seeing it with your own eyes. All right, now that we've both eaten our fill." Iroh set down his napkin and rose to his feet. He paused, and every word carried undeniable weight. "Let me ask again, since when exactly was lunch abolished in this house?" The Duchess must be mistaken. A red-haired maid could no longer stay silent. She spoke urgently, trying to turn the accusation toward Claire. At that, Claire lifted her head, her face showing just the right amount of surprise and innocence. "I might be." She lowered her eyes as though reflecting sincerely, then said in an apologetic, understanding tone, "Perhaps so. You all worked hard to prepare it, only for it to be wasted because of my misunderstanding." "Exactly. That's right. We clearly prepared everything." The head chef immediately echoed her, as if clutching at a lifeline. "Being falsely accused like this is truly troublesome." "That's such a pity," Claire said calmly, but her words cut like a surgeon's knife straight to the heart of their lie. "Then what was on today's lunch menu?" The head chef went pale at once. Sweat poured even more heavily from his brow. He stammered helplessly, unable to produce a single word. "Well, the female steward panicked too." As the lie teetered on the verge of collapse, panic spread among the servants. A blonde maid standing farther back finally cracked under the pressure. Pointing at the red-haired maid beside her, she shrieked. It was Annie's idea. "Annie said we should teach the Duchess a lesson." As if she had thrown caution aside, the blonde maid spilled everything. "We wanted to stop her, but..." Claire listened quietly, her expression not changing in the slightest. "I understand," she said softly. Her voice rang calm and clear through the dining room. "Then bring Annie here." No sooner had she spoken than a voice came from the row of servants, trembling like cicadas in winter. "Aivanya." There was not a trace of fear on Annie's face. Meeting everyone's gaze, especially Claire's, she spoke calmly, as though simply stating a fact unrelated to herself. "Am I going to be dismissed?" "Claire." Iroh's voice returned to its usual gentleness. "How would you like to handle this?" Claire gave a tiny start. She lifted her head and met Iroh's calm green eyes. "I'm allowed to decide?" she asked uncertainly. Since arriving at this residence, this was the first time she had truly been granted the authority of its mistress. "Then Annie, starting tomorrow, you will work directly under me." Iroh offered no comment on this. His gaze remained on Claire's face as he asked once more for confirmation. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Claire settled calmly back into her chair, her eyes meeting Annie's defiant ones in midair. Then she gave her answer clearly and firmly. "Yes." The decision brought a flash of surprise to Annie's eyes and a collective sigh of relief from the other servants. Thus, that moderate disturbance ended in a wholly unexpected way. Several days later, the Iroh ducal residence returned to its usual peace. Duke Iroh sat at his desk, dealing with a mountain of official work. The room was very quiet, with only the rustle of a pen across paper and the distant birdsong from the courtyard outside the window. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Seated behind his desk, Iroh held a feather pen that did not touch the page for a long while. resting his chin on one hand. He wore a faint smile, so shallow that even he himself had not noticed it. "Irol, you seem to be in quite a good mood lately." A teasing voice broke the silence of the study. A man with dark brown hair and a green vest walked in. He leaned casually against the sofa, curiosity shining in his crimson eyes. "What happened? You went home so early yesterday." The man pressed. "How do you know that?" Irol looked up in surprise. "One of your subordinates told me with a smug grin on his face. Said you rushed home to accompany your newlywed wife. So hurry up and confess. What exactly happened?" Leaning forward, the man looked as if he would never let the matter go without getting an answer. Irol set down his pen. He did not answer directly, but slowly began to speak as though savoring the memory. "When I got home yesterday, Claire was cooking. She was cooking and singing at the same time. The sight was so strange and so pleasant that for a moment I even forgot to speak." "Huh!" The man burst out laughing. "Your wife really is no ordinary woman. But why was she cooking? Was she specifically making food for you?" The smile vanished from Irol's face at once, replaced by gloom. Lowering his eyes, he said in a low voice, "It was my fault." He told his friend exactly what had happened the day before. It seems the servants in the residence weren't preparing meals for her. Hearing that, the teasing expression on the man's face faded too. Thoughtfully, he said, "So because she has no mother at her side to back her up, your wife was bullied like that? That's why she cooked for herself? She's a very strong-willed woman, isn't she?" The man concluded, "I need her to remain my wife for a full year." Irol's voice was calm, yet carried an unshakable firmness. "So, I originally intended to solve the matter by dismissing the ringleader." He thought of the maid named Annie and the frightened faces behind her. But Claire didn't dismiss anyone. Wouldn't it be simpler just to replace them all with more obedient servants? His friend asked, puzzled. That was obviously the most efficient method, and the one most in line with noble customs. "I thought so too, so I asked her." Leaning back in his chair, Irol said, "She said that even if she couldn't get enough to eat, it wasn't really a major problem. She seems extremely loyal to the Irol family." That was how Claire described the maid who had led the trouble. "It would be a waste to drive away someone with that kind of loyalty." "I'd say she's loyal to you." More like, his friend snorted. "She was willing to endure being mistreated. Anyone would want to enjoy life, even if it was only for a year." "Your wife really is an interesting person." "Yes, she really is," Irol agreed softly, a complicated admiration in his eyes that even he himself had not noticed. "When I first met Claire, I thought she was a little odd. She proposed a contract marriage simply because it met all the conditions. She was the perfect partner, one who wouldn't bring any trouble at all. But after we got married, my impression of her began to change. She did laundry cheerfully. She cooks while singing. Sometimes she smiles with a helpless expression. She seems unstable, as though she has completely sealed herself off from the world." Irol, his friend's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Do you think it might be time to introduce your wife to me?" Irol thought for a moment, then finally nodded. "Her dresses have already arrived. I'll invite her to attend the next ball." Later, Claire wore a brand new pink lace gown. In a voice as soft as the evening breeze, she said, "Welcome home." But the moment Irol saw her, his steps halted ever so slightly. He looked at her in a daze. "Your Grace?" Seeing that he did not react for a long moment, Claire called to him softly in confusion. "Ah, saw thee." Irol suddenly snapped back to himself, a trace of awkwardness crossing his face. He cleared his throat and found an excuse. "Today, my subordinates urged me to come home early again." He held out his hand to her. "There's a ball in 2 weeks. Would you be willing to go with me?" Claire froze. She looked at his outstretched hand, then at his serious green eyes. Her violet eyes were full of incredulous surprise. "A ball?" "Yes. The Boyle family invited us. We're on good terms with them." "I understand." Claire lowered her gaze, as if digesting the information. Claire agreed. "I'll do my very best." That night in her room, Claire thought, "This will be my first ball as the Duchess. I have to dance, right? But I don't know how to dance. What should I do?" Earlier that day, Irol had said goodbye to Claire. Claire thought, there's still 15 days left. I need to find a dance partner. Just as she was about to sink into deep thought, a maid was passing by carrying a stack of folded clothes. "Wait a moment." Claire suddenly spoke, her voice not loud, yet it made the maid freeze at once. Claire's gaze landed on the pile of clothes. They belonged to her husband. He always paid attention to his appearance and wore different outfits regularly. If one set of clothes disappeared for a few days, it probably wouldn't be a problem. "All right, finished." She clapped her hands and looked at her handiwork. a playful smile on her face. A person made from clothes and pillows now lay quietly on the bed. Maybe it's a little too big, but it should work. She muttered to herself, but the height is about right. If that's the case, maybe this really can work. From today onward, you're my dance partner. Closing her eyes, she made the declaration softly, a relieved smile at the corner of her lips. Then she found a fountain pen among the clothes. A tasteful old fountain pen. She thought, I'll return it when he comes back. All right, Your Grace. Closing her eyes, wearing a solemn yet self-amused smile, she said softly, please take care of me. I don't know how to keep the proper rhythm and steps, but I'm starting to enjoy this. Yet amid that clumsy joy, a familiar low voice suddenly rang out without warning, shattering the quiet. Claire, that pen, his gaze passed beyond her, seeming to land somewhere else. Calm down, she told herself. But her heartbeat would not settle. Right, he needs that pen. I have to give it to him quickly. But the instant she stepped forward, her foot caught in the trousers of the pile of clothes serving as her partner. Her body lost balance, and she pitched forward uncontrollably. The violent impact with the cold floor that she expected never came. Instead, she fell into a firm, warm embrace. Claire, a low, slightly husky voice sounded above her head. May I ask what exactly is going on here? Claire's cheeks instantly burst into flames, the heat spreading from her neck all the way to her ears. What is this situation? Claire's mind went blank. She could not think at all. Irel, just as she was so mortified she nearly wanted to evaporate on the spot, Irel suddenly loosened his arms and steadied her by the shoulders so she could sit firmly on the floor. Did you get hurt anywhere? He asked with genuine concern, his eyes sweeping over her seriously. I'm Fine. I exercise regularly. She answered first, trying to sound casual, as if the accident just now had been a tiny mistake. And so the two of them ended up sitting face to face on the floor in a way entirely unsuited to noble etiquette. That's good. Irel seemed relieved. Looking at her, he apparently wanted to ease the atmosphere, so he changed the subject. By the way, how's your work going? I came back because I forgot to take something. At that moment, their eyes crossed the awkward distance between them and landed, at the same time, on a small mahogany table not far away. Resting there quietly was an old-fashioned black fountain pen. I found this in your clothes. Claire broke the silence first. She pointed to the pen she had placed on the table, trying to find a reasonable excuse for her reckless behavior just now. His gaze ultimately landed on the heap of wreckage, and there was an obvious trace of teasing in his tone. Were you just dancing with that? Claire's cheeks flared crimson again, so he had seen all of it. Just then, the topic suddenly shifted, and his tone turned serious. You're attending the ball the week after next, right? Claire asked. She took a deep breath and decided to tell the truth. Rather than saying I'm bad at dancing, she struggled for words, but ultimately summoned her courage and raised her head to look directly into his eyes. I've never danced before. Irel's gaze tightened slightly, clearly surprised by the answer. He paused, then her voice lowered as if she were speaking of something trivial. Up until now, I've never even been invited once. But before, I never thought that meant anything. She quickly adjusted her mindset, and her eyes grew firm again. But I can't go on like that anymore, especially now that I'm the Duchess. Am I right? Completely right. Irel affirmed her without hesitation. Looking at her, he analyzed in an even tone. Since you'll be meeting many people, you may receive dancing invitations from some of them. Then his tone shifted, carrying a decisive finality that left no room for objection. Remember, you have the right to refuse them, but you must dance at least one dance with me. Looking at the stupid puppet on the floor, Claire finally let out a relieved smile. That's why I wanted to do something to prepare. Normally speaking, it's difficult for a beginner to practice with a doll like that. Irel evaluated in the tone of an expert. I'm really sorry. I think I'll hire an instructor. That won't be necessary. Irel's decisive voice cut her off. Claire jerked her head up, her face full of surprise. You don't need to hire an instructor, Irel repeated. Irel extended his hand to her, wearing a gentle yet resolute smile she had never seen on him before. I'll teach you. The proposal struck Claire like a clap of thunder, leaving her completely frozen. You'll teach me? She repeated, almost unable to believe her ears. Irel answered firmly. There isn't enough time to find an instructor now anyway. We'll practice for an hour every day before breakfast. What do you think? Claire instinctively reached out her hand and let it be wrapped in the warmth of his palm. His proposal was perfectly reasonable and yet unbelievable in every way. But aren't you busy? She asked, voicing the most realistic concern. Precisely because I have a lot of paperwork. I'd like some exercise. This works out well. And besides, it won't be only this once. There will be many opportunities to dance over the course of this year. So it would be better for us to build our coordination early, wouldn't it? He attributed everything to the terms of their contract, to the responsibilities of a duke and duchess, leaving her with no reason to refuse. Then it's settled. We start tomorrow. And Claire, his palm was warm and broad. The heat that came through her hair made Claire's heart skip a beat. She instinctively looked up, a suspicious blush rising to her cheeks. Thank you for everything you've done. Because of you, I wasn't made to look inferior to others. The warm current of memory had not yet faded, but in reality Irel had already withdrawn his hand and turned toward the massive door carved with intricate patterns. With a soft click, the door closed gently, shutting him out. Only Claire and her collapsed dance partner remained in the room. After a long silence, Claire suddenly raised a hand and covered her burning cheeks. He saw me. The realization exploded in her mind like thunder. This man always appears at exactly the right time and exactly the worst time. She was both embarrassed and flustered, feeling as though she had nowhere to hide. In the end, she vented all of her frustration on the innocent culprit. In her mind, the scene from just now kept replaying, the one that was both humiliating and made her heart tremble a little. Maybe I should do something to change my mood, she thought. May, Annie, are you there? She called softly toward the door. Yes, Your Grace. In response, two neatly dressed maids entered the room. One of them, May, always wore an enthusiastic smile on her face. I like to drink some tea while admiring the roses. Claire's gaze turned toward the blooming garden outside the window, and her voice returned to its usual calm. Could you prepare that for me? Of course. Right away, Your Grace. May agreed cheerfully at once, then turned to the other maid beside her. Annie will assist you. Understood, Annie replied. Her voice was flat and expressionless, as if she were merely receiving the most ordinary order. To others, that attitude might have looked rude or inattentive, but to Claire, it felt strangely and perfectly comfortable. For my one-year contract, perhaps this is just right. The sun was bright, and the rose garden of the ducal residence was in full bloom. Countless gorgeous red roses swayed in the breeze, their rich fragrance filling the air. Claire walked slowly along the stone path. To think I would have the chance to drink tea in such a beautiful garden. She lightly touched the petal of a nearby rose, deeply moved. For me, this truly is a luxurious pleasure. So that she could enjoy this luxury in peace, she had deliberately hidden the mannequin dance partner she jokingly called her child inside the dressing room closet. That way, she could quietly, "Wait, what are you doing?" An urgent cry shattered the calm. The maid Annie was holding an elegant silver teapot, about to pour her some tea, but the way she was doing it made Claire's heart tighten sharply. If you pour it like that, the tea leaves will be ruined. The words nearly slipped out of her mouth. May and Annie both froze and looked at each other, clearly not expecting such a strong reaction from their mistress. Claire realized her tone had been too harsh. She immediately softened her expression and looked at the lively maid May. In a gentler voice, she said, I moved around a little just now, so I'm quite hungry. Tea alone probably won't be enough. May still looked a little slow to catch on, so Claire gave her a faint smile and handed her way out. May immediately understood, and a warm smile bloomed on her face again. Understood. I'll go prepare some sweets right away. Thank you. Claire nodded with a smile. As May's light footsteps faded into the distance, only Claire and Annie remained in the pavilion. Sunlight filtered through the lattice, casting mottled shadows across the table. Her goal had been achieved. Claire lifted the tea Annie had just re-brewed for her and took a small sip. That was too strict of me, but that was the best May can manage right now. Annie stood quietly at the side without speaking. I know, Claire said, turning her head, but I can't just let her keep doing things that badly. So I want to borrow your skill and help her improve. That way she won't embarrass herself elsewhere in the future. Annie's face remained mostly expressionless, but her gaze sharpened slightly. She asked bluntly, was sending her away just now for that purpose? Yes, exactly, Claire admitted openly. And besides, aren't you strict with me too? I think having someone like you by my side helps keep me alert at all times. She paused, and her voice became even more sincere. Even if you dislike me, that's fine, but please keep teaching May. A faint ripple stirred in Annie's heart. Of course, she knew how clumsy May was. In her current state, I can't just leave her alone either. Perhaps with the Duchess encouraging her, she won't lose heart so easily. Looking at the woman before her, Annie's thoughts became complicated. Then may I take some credit for this? Claire suddenly blinked mischievously, trying to break the serious mood. Thank goodness. She let out a quiet sigh of relief inside. Picking up the teapot, she personally poured Annie a cup and pushed it toward her. With Annie here, I'm sure May will soon become a proper maid. As she watched Annie lift the teacup with flawless grace, the heavy stone in Claire's heart finally settled. If things continue like this, then even without me, they'll be able to live well. When the one-year term arrives and she leaves, at least she will have one less thing to worry about. Claire broke the comfortable silence. Annie, I think you might know about this. Annie gave a slight bow, her tone calm. About what exactly? Where can I get cosmetics? The question was like a small stone tossed into Annie's still ancient well of a heart, stirring a faint ripple. HM? Annie immediately straightened her face. In a deliberately stern tone, as if scolding an unruly younger sister, Claire said, Goodness, I never expected you to speak to your mistress in that tone. Annie instantly realized her lapse, quickly straightened her back, and asked again in a perfect, composed manner, I sincerely apologize. May I ask why you're asking? I need to think about what makeup to wear to the ball in 2 weeks, Claire explained, as if that tiny interruption had never happened. However, the question only deepened Annie's confusion. My lady, Annie asked carefully, testing the waters, did you ever wear makeup before you were married? Never. Claire's answer was crisp, as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. I never thought it was a necessity. A necessity? Annie's brow twitched almost imperceptibly. She could not understand how that word could come from the mouth of a noble lady, now a duchess. But you attended balls before, didn't you? Yes, but I went barefaced. That was because of what Amelia said to me. That's why I was never interested in cosmetics before. I understand. Annie's voice pulled Claire out of her memories. This capable maid had already accepted reality and begun thinking of a solution. Then you'll need a full set. A full set? Claire hesitated. I think I should discuss it with my husband first. There's no need to ask for permission over such a small matter. Annie's tone allowed no argument. I've never heard that there are any restrictions on your shopping. Is that so? Claire thought for a moment, then nodded. That's true. He did say I could buy anything I need. Then are there any other necessities you need to purchase? Annie shifted fully into work mode and began methodically taking stock. No, I can't think of anything else. Claire shook her head blankly. Annie looked at her with an indescribable expression. Are you serious? The completely undisguised skepticism made Claire shift her gaze away guiltily. Annie let out a helpless sigh, though her tone softened considerably. My lady, you are somewhat inattentive. She paused, seeming to feel that wording was unsuitable, then replaced it with something gentler. No, rather, you're too mild by nature. Let me inspect your personal belongings and see whether there are any other necessities that need replacing. Looking at Claire, she made the request solemnly. May I do that? Of course. Claire agreed without hesitation. There was a tremor in Annie's voice that even she did not seem to notice. Someone like me, who always bullies people, is it really all right for me to examine your private belongings? It's fine, Claire said softly. You don't have to treat me so cautiously. That only makes me uncomfortable instead. Understood. Annie gave a slight bow, accepting the task. I'm counting on you, Claire said. Yes, I'll go make preparations now, Annie replied, then turned and left the pavilion. Not long after Annie disappeared, May returned carrying an enormous silver tray. It was piled with all kinds of delicate pastries, dazzling and tempting in the sunlight. At the sight of such a lavish spread, even May couldn't help exclaiming happily, what a wonderful sight. Looking at the adorable little sweets, Claire temporarily pushed aside the thoughts in her heart. There's still dance practice later. Since I can eat now, I should fill my stomach first. Thinking that, she picked up a small Madeleine cake. For some reason, I'm actually looking forward to the dance lesson later. But at that very moment, a completely different, entirely new thought pushed through the cracks in the wall around her heart like a stubborn vine, without warning. Before our dance practice tomorrow, I should practice once more with that child. Looking forward to having her hand taken. Looking forward to being drawn into his arms. Looking forward to matching his steps and turning under his lead. The thought was so warm, so tempting, that it made her forget all reason and caution in an instant. It was precisely that sudden warmth that jolted her awake. Claire froze, her violet eyes filled with alarm. She unconsciously lifted a hand, her fingertips lightly touching her lips. A bead of cold sweat slid down from her temple, and her cheeks flushed uncontrollably. This is bad. This is really bad. Claire's heart was full of panic and unease. Oh no, that child is in my dressing room. She rushed to the door, breathing hard, and found her maid Annie standing inside. Out of breath and flustered, she called the maid's name. Annie, still in her maid uniform, was holding a doll dressed in a man's coat, looking utterly perplexed. She first said, "My lady," and then asked in confusion, "What is this?" Claire instantly lost all composure and could only stammer that, May tilted her head, then suddenly thought of something and said, isn't this the outfit His Grace wore yesterday?" Beside her, Claire had already turned bright red with embarrassment. Seeing the Duchess covering her face with both hands in utter mortification, May cried out in surprise, "My lady." Annie seemed to misunderstand something. Wearing an expression of sympathy and understanding, she asked softly, "Have you been feeling lonely? Because His Grace has been so busy lately." Claire had no answer and could only peek at her through the gaps between her fingers. Annie suddenly lowered her head with a firm expression and said solemnly, "Please forgive me." Then she stuffed the doll into Claire's arms and turned to leave. "I still have other work to do." "In that case, my lady, please use this doll as you wish." Claire clutched the mannequin dressed in men's clothing tightly and murmured in self-defense to May beside her, "It's not that I was feeling lonely or anything." May, her neat braids in place, looked at her gently and replied with a smile, "I understand." Seeing that all-knowing look on May's face, Claire screamed inwardly in frustration, "You understand nothing at all." Scene change. Brilliant sunlight shone over a magnificent castle. On the training grounds, Iroh wiped away his sweat and lifted his soaked white shirt, revealing sharply defined abdominal muscles. He thought that since he couldn't focus on work, he had come here to train instead. Holding a long sword, he stretched his body and said to his companion, "As expected, moving my body does feel refreshing." Suddenly, his thoughts drifted to the past. He remembered his younger days, those green eyes full of resolve. "I joined the Night Order at 18. He continued, recalling, "Later, my efforts were recognized, and I became a royal guard knight serving the king. Even after inheriting my title, I still served both as head of my house and as a royal guard knight. But I always felt that doing both at once meant I was failing at both. So when I was 22, I left the royal guard." His thoughts returned to the present, and he continued explaining to his companion, "I've been working indoors a lot lately, so I come here from time to time to exercise." A black-haired man named Keith walked toward him and greeted him. "Working hard, Iroh? It's rare to see you here so early." Iroh replied, "Same to you." Keith added, "I really didn't expect to see you this early." Smiling, he continued, "The moment I heard you were here, I came right away." Looking at him, Keith asked, "You always seem to have something interesting to share lately. So what is it this time?" Iroh answered simply, "Nothing." Keith clearly did not believe him. "Impossible. If this were just exercise, you wouldn't look like that. You'll feel better if you spit out." Iroh fell silent, a complicated look crossing his face. The two of them moved to a nearby stone bench. Keith sat down, crossing his arms, and looked at Iroh. "So what exactly happened?" Iroh sighed and finally said, "It's Claire." Keith immediately understood. "Oh, I was wondering if it had something to do with your wife. Did you quarrel with her?" "No," il answered firmly. Keith pressed on in confusion. "What? So you're not depressed because she dislikes you or something?" Iroh explained, "It was my idea to have a contract marriage. If you had to choose between like and dislike, then she probably hates me." Keith agreed. "That would make sense. For a woman, marriage is a once-in-a-lifetime ceremony." Iroh shot back, "So what?" Iroh continued, "So there was this doll." Keith asked curiously, "A doll? You mean literally? An actual doll?" Iroh nodded. "Yes," trying not to laugh as he recalled it. He said, "Though honestly, it was even less refined than an ordinary doll. It was made out of bedding and sheets." Keith looked completely baffled, and Iroh began explaining what happened. "This morning, I forgot my pen and had to return to the estate to get it. It turned out I'd left it in the clothes I wore yesterday. But when I went to the room where the clothes had been put, they were gone. The maid said the Duchess had taken them." Iroh went on, "In the end, I found her in Claire's room. But at that moment, Iroh smiled and said, Claire was dancing." Keith asked in surprise, "You mean dancing with that doll you mentioned?" Iroh confirmed it. "The doll was even wearing my clothes." He remembered the sight. Claire was holding the mannequin, her face full of a happy smile, as if she were dancing with a child. Iroh felt countless emotions rise in him, but it was the first time I'd ever seen a woman look that happy while dancing. Keith asked in confusion, "Why would something like that happen?" Iroh explained, "Because she still doesn't know how to dance." Keith remembered something and said, "Wasn't her attention-seeking sister always dancing with all sorts of men?" Iroh replied, "That's right." He fell into thought. There's no doubt her upbringing was very different from her sister's. I need to learn more. I looked into her family before, but I deliberately avoided digging too deeply into their private affairs. He asked himself honestly, because I was afraid that if I knew too much, I would end up liking her. But now it seems I still need to investigate Claire's family more thoroughly. Iroh made up his mind. Keith teased him, so a doll wearing your clothes became her dance partner. Ichem, I only saw her once at your wedding, but I never imagined she'd be this interesting. He continued, compared to a woman you've clung to for 10 years. Isn't your current wife much more charming? Iroh's face turned slightly red, and he snapped irritably. Shut up. Keith continued mercilessly. You just haven't had anyone else to love, right? Isn't that why you've been obsessing over one woman for 10 years? Looking at Iroh, he added ruthlessly, I'm willing to bet she may have forgotten you entirely and is happily enjoying her life. Iroh's gaze dimmed, and his thoughts drifted back. He remembered that woman, Safina, the princess of this nation. He recalled, ever since I can remember, we were close childhood friends. Before I knew it, she had become like a lover to me. I once thought we were destined to be together one day, but she was someone full of curiosity. When she was 14, she said, I want to explore the world. So under the name of studying abroad, she began traveling through various countries. Then this year, the king ordered Safina to return home before the year's end. Keith cut into his memories and said seriously, it's time to face reality. You're just toying with a woman's life. Seeing that Iroh remained silent, Keith stood up to leave. All right, I should get back to work. Don't overthink it, okay? Iroh's thoughts returned to the present, and resolve once again settled in his eyes. The scene shifted to a luxurious residence. Iroh said gently to Claire, Claire, you've been staring at your feet the whole time. Claire, nervous, was just about to apologize when her foot slipped. She let out a startled cry. Oh dear. She muttered dejectedly to herself, I really don't think I have any talent for dancing. Iroh encouraged her. Everyone starts out like this. You'll improve with practice. Claire thought to herself, there's no doubt my husband was born with talent for dancing. I can't imagine him ever stumbling or dancing poorly. Iroh gently reminded her again, Claire, you're paying too much attention to your partner's steps. Claire asked softly, if I step on you, won't it hurt? Iroh gave a quiet laugh and comforted her. It's fine. You're not heavy. Besides, stepping on your partner's feet has one advantage. Claire asked in confusion, an advantage? Iroh explained. It means the men who don't like being stepped on won't ask you to dance again. Claire nodded in realization. That's true. Iroh continued. I imagine there will be many invitations for you at the ball. But the more something like that happens, the fewer invitations you'll receive, right? Claire said worriedly, but if I never get better, then you'll have to endure it for an entire year. Iroh gently held her hand and said firmly, I can endure it. It's all right. We are husband and wife. After all, there's no need to worry about me. Claire thought silently, you say that, but we're not a real married couple. That's exactly what I'm worried about. She lifted her head and said to Iroh sincerely, during this time, I've caused you a great deal of trouble. Iroh smiled and asked, you mean what happened a few days ago? Claire remembered that day. A few days ago was the day Annie checked my luggage. She remembered what had been inside. 5 worn-out dresses, a pair of shoes mended countless times, an old sewing kit, her grandmother's keepsake ring, a comb, and a few small items. That was everything I brought with me to the Iroh ducal residence. Annie simply couldn't bear to watch, so she told my husband directly. Full of apology, Claire said, I'm truly sorry that something like that happened. Iroh responded gently, no, I just failed to think things through carefully enough. Claire hurriedly said, not at all. It was because I refused to listen to Annie, no matter how many times she told me. Thanks to Annie, all my necessities were piled up the very next day. These shoes are one of them. Iroh continued, even if Annie hadn't done that, I really had been negligent. Even so, Claire said, I still apologize for causing you trouble. Looking at her, Iroh said, I actually found it interesting, so I don't truly mind. Considering how unusual you are, your judgment of people seems remarkably accurate. Iroh continued, even Annie, who used to bully people all the time, has started keeping pace with you now. Claire smiled. Really? But Annie is always scolding me. And May too, you know? But May doesn't come running to complain to me. That must be because Annie is a good teacher. Iroh explained, if she were only doing her job, she wouldn't get that angry. That actually proves she regards you as her mistress. Claire muttered after being scolded like that. I can't even tell who the mistress is anymore. Relieved, Iroh said, seeing that you're handling things better than I expected puts my mind at ease. All right, it's about time. Let's continue practicing. Claire answered obediently, yes, teacher. Iroh looked at her gently and said, all right, since you've been so concerned about my feet, shall we try a different way to practice? Lift your eyes and look here. Iroh gently raised Claire's chin and continued, today, we should practice dancing while talking. He emphasized it again. Today, we should practice dancing while talking. Claire's cheeks turned pink, and she looked at him nervously. Talking while dancing? Irel answered firmly. I believe you can do it, Claire. He took her hand and began to guide her. All right, let's begin. 1, 2. The two of them moved their feet to the beat as Irel counted. 1, 2. Claire asked nervously. Keith, then what should we talk about? Irel replied, well, people usually make small talk while dancing. He gave an example. For instance, have you gotten used to life at the estate? Claire answered, yes, of course. Irel continued, and about the food as well. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. Claire smiled and said, it's all right. I stayed silent the whole time, so it couldn't be helped that no one noticed. Please don't worry. Irel asked with concern. Even if it was only for a few days, it must have been hard. Claire answered calmly, it was nothing. I'm used to going hungry. Irel asked in surprise, used to it? Did that happen before? Claire explained, yes. My family was very poor, so things like that happen often in my home. Claire thought, talking about myself makes it feel as if I'm trying to earn sympathy. I hate that, right? I just need to change the subject. So Claire smiled at Irel and said, enough about me. Please tell me more about yourself, my lord. Claire asked curiously, what kind of woman was the one you used to love? Oh, Irel fell silent for a moment, which left Claire at a loss. Claire thought, of course, just like me, he has things he doesn't want to talk about. I was only thinking of myself and didn't consider his feelings. How embarrassing. So Claire quickly said, just pretend I never asked. No. It's all right, Irel interrupted and began speaking of Safina. She's 1 year younger than me, but fearless by nature. If she had been born a man, she probably would have lived more freely. He continued, because of her family and her age, I was likely the only suitable man for her, so we were engaged from childhood. Claire said with feeling, then you two must have made a very well-matched pair. Irel added, but one day, she suddenly left for a foreign land. Looking at him, Claire asked softly, you waited for her for 10 years? Irel gave a self-mocking smile. Yes, strange, isn't it? But Claire answered seriously, not at all. There are as many forms of emotion as there are people. You're very devoted. Irel shook his head. No, just as my friend said, maybe I simply never met the right person. Then he apologized sincerely. I'm sorry for dragging you into such a foolish story. He continued, and although we're already married, apologizing now is meaningless. But Claire responded in person, my lord, please don't worry. Looking at Irel firmly, she said, I was the one who wanted to accept this proposal. Claire continued, it may take some time, but ever since childhood, I never received much love from my parents. She remembered the past. I often couldn't get enough to eat, or I was forced to do all the washing and cleaning with almost no help at all. Irel asked, you had to do all that alone? What about your sister? Claire explained, my younger sister was raised with affection and indulgence, so that was impossible. She was proud of being the child our parents loved more. For that girl, everything had to come first. Claire continued, because of that, I never even dreamed of a happy marriage. Either I would marry a wealthy merchant to repay my family's debts, or I would marry someone far older than myself. Those were the only two choices I had. Claire turned her head and kept dancing with a smile, as if the sadness from a moment ago had never existed. Suddenly, her foot slipped and she stepped on Irel's foot. Claire winced in pain and thought, ouch. My shoes rubbed blisters on me. Her foot gave way, she lost her balance, and she fell toward Irel, her body pressing tightly against his chest. Against a backdrop of flowers and starlight, Claire leaned into Irel's arms. Her cheeks flushed and her heart raced. She felt something and thought, what is that? Is that my lord heartbeat? What a warm, gentle, reassuring sound. She lifted her head and met Irel's tender gaze. Claire explained in slight confusion. What I mean is, I never had the right to hope for a happy marriage. But you saved me from that kind of life. She lifted her head, eyes shining, and said to Irel with complete sincerity, so no matter what others say, to me, you are a hero. Deeply moved by her words, Irel froze in place. The two of them silently gazed at each other. The atmosphere turned subtly charged. Claire reached out and gently touched Irel's cheek. My lord? She asked in confusion. To her surprise, his face was burning hot. She quickly drew back her hand and asked with concern, do you have a fever? That's not good. Are you sick? Irel's cheeks were crimson, but he still insisted stubbornly, no. I'm fine. Claire didn't believe him. Pointing at his face, she said, your ears and neck are red too. How could you possibly be fine? Anxiously, she asked, I say, should I call a doctor? Or should you lie down first? Irel tried to calm her. Can you still stand? Is someone there? Can we get someone to help? It's all right, calm down. Claire spun in circles in panic. Your face is that red. How am I supposed to stay calm? Irel covered his face with his sleeve, looking embarrassed. He stammered. Claire hurriedly said, please wait. I'll go call someone right away. Irel quickly tried to stop her. Wait, but Claire had already turned and hurried away, worry filling her heart. Will he be all right? After the doctor examined him, he told Claire, yes, there is no fever. He's perfectly fine. Claire asked uneasily, really? Irel assured her, I'm fine. Don't worry. Claire still suggested, maybe you should rest for a day. Irel refused. No, that won't be necessary. I'll be going now. With that, he left, leaving Claire behind. Sitting on the sofa, Claire said to her mannequin, I'm worried. You think so too, don't you? She asked it gently. You're tired too, aren't you? The mannequin's head drooped limply. She noticed the clothes on the mannequin had been changed. The doll's outfit is different now. That must have been those two girls. Claire felt a little embarrassed. How humiliating. Looking at the documents piled on the table, she reproached herself. May and Annie are busy preparing for the ball, and yet I made them worry over nothing. Claire picked up the papers and forced herself to gather her spirits. All right, I have to get back to work. She thought, I've gradually been taking over the butler's duties, and I'm just starting to get used to it. But I'm too worried to focus on anything else. I hope he's all right. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Claire wondered, who could it be? She answered, come in. The door opened, and a man in a chef's uniform entered. Excuse me, he said respectfully. My lady. Claire looked at him and thought, isn't this the chef from before? The chef came in carrying a tray of steaming muffins, leaving Claire at a loss. The chef explained, I suddenly showed up out of nowhere, so you're probably wondering what this is about. I brought you a cake I made, my lady. This is an apology for what happened a few days ago. An apology? The chef thought. Normally, the sweets noble ladies like are extremely delicate. I used to admire those desserts that looked like glittering jewels. But judging by her reaction, perhaps something like this suits her better. A plate of golden muffins. The chef remembered the satisfied expression on Claire's face when she ate the muffins before. Looking at the chef, Claire thought, he suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I was wondering what was going on. She remembered what her sister once said to her. I can't believe you've never eaten anything this delicious before. Sister, you really. The chef explained again, my lady, I brought these cakes as an apology for what happened the other day. An apology? Claire thought. Usually, the sweets noble women like are visually elegant. Breathing in the fragrance of the cakes, she thought, they smell wonderful. She picked one up and took a bite. A deeply satisfied look spread across her face. Delicious, she thought. If Annie sees me eating while standing up, she'll definitely scold me. Just then, Annie and May came in. May asked, my lady, what are those cakes? Claire explained, the chef on the other day sent them as an apology. May said in surprise, so many? Claire smiled. Yes, and they're very tasty. You two should try some as well. May asked happily, really? We can. Claire answered firmly, of course, if I ate all of them myself, it would take a month. She noticed Annie's serious expression and asked, Annie, what's wrong? Don't look so stern. May guessed, don't you like sweets? Annie replied, May, you really are carefree. Then Annie asked Claire with concern, my lady, do you truly think this is all right? Claire smiled and answered, it's fine. He cooks properly every day. She thought, as expected, Annie has seen through the chef's true intentions. May agreed, that's true. Annie then said, but what should we do with so many? Even the three of us won't be able to finish them. Then Annie proposed, why not take some as a gift to your husband? Claire looked a little surprised. A gift? May saw through her thoughts. You're worried about his grace, aren't you? Annie added, bring these cakes along and check on him while you're at it. Claire hesitated. Wouldn't that disturb him? Annie immediately replied, it's all right. If he's busy, you can simply leave the cakes and come back. Claire considered it. You're right. If I disturb him, I can just come straight back. I've been thinking about this nonstop and can't focus on anything else. She rose to her feet with resolve. I'll go. As Claire rode in the carriage, she grew more and more nervous. I'm starting to feel nervous now, she thought. Annie and May originally offered to come with me, but they're both so busy that I felt bad troubling them further, so I refused. She encouraged herself. It's all right. I'm just delivering a gift. Then another thought struck her. All right, if I meet my husband's colleagues, I should greet them properly. Thinking that, she continued musing. I should say something like, thank you for always taking care of him. The carriage rattled down the country road, right? She reminded herself, I have to be careful. I can't let them discover that I'm only a temporary duchess. The coachman said to Claire, my lady, we've arrived at the gates of the imperial palace. He continued, as for your carriage back, if you notify the duke, he will arrange one for you. Claire was just about to answer, all right, I understand, when she realized the carriage had already sped away. She thought in surprise, he left so fast. Claire walked toward the gate. A guard called out next. Looking at the guards by the entrance, Claire thought, so that's the entrance. She stepped forward and said, excuse me, I'm from the house of Irel. I have something I'd like to deliver to my husband. I mean to the duke. The guard fixed her with a sharp look and said, then may I see your pass? Claire asked in surprise, a pass? I need one of those. The guard answered firmly, yes. The guard said sternly, "Without a pass or a royal order, you may not enter." "Didn't the Duke tell you that?" Claire answered awkwardly, "Oh, I came without informing him in advance." "Then could you at least deliver this to my husband?" The guard refused. "I am Sora. We are not permitted to accept any items either." Claire lowered her head in disappointment. "I understand." The guard explained, "Yes, especially in the case of Duke Iroh. We receive gifts every day. We've been instructed to refuse all of them." Claire thought, being popular really isn't easy. Even after marriage, letters and gifts still kept pouring into the estate. The guard looked stern. "He must have a hard time while working too." Claire said to the guard, "That must be difficult." The guard replied, "Without a pass or a royal order, you are not allowed inside. But this is just part of the job. Still, you're the first person who's ever claimed to be the Duke's wife." "Didn't you hear this from the Duke?" Claire felt awkward. "I really am the Duke's wife." "You must be joking," the guard said with a laugh. "The Duchess of Iroh is famous for being plain and unremarkable." The guard looked at Claire and said, "Miss, you're beautiful. Anyone can see that. You're not the woman from the rumors. The only thing you might share with her is your age." Claire thought with a bitter smile, "Well, thanks to these clothes at least, I don't look so plain anymore. But the problem is, if I can't see him, I can't get home." She thought, it takes 40 minutes by carriage. Walking back is unrealistic. Summoning her courage, Claire asked the guard, "Then if I wait here for him, would that be a problem?" The guard answered, "Not a problem at all, but I think it will be pointless." Claire found a quiet corner and silently waited. An hour and a half passed, and he still had not appeared. The guard came over and said to Claire, "You're still waiting?" He continued, "When I came back from my break and saw you still here, I was shocked. Plenty of other ladies have waited here before, but you've set a new record." Claire looked surprised. "Really?" The guard answered firmly, "Yes." The guard advised her, "They all tried hard too, but if that's his fate, you should give up. Even the Duke wouldn't cheat so soon after getting married." He continued, "But right now it's impossible. I'm sure you'll have another chance." Claire asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" The guard lowered his voice mysteriously. "Just between us, there are rumors that their marriage is a contract marriage." He continued, revealing, "They say the two of them will divorce after 1 year. You may have heard that the Duchess of Iroh is known in high society for being eccentric, right? For him to choose someone like that is strange. So there are rumors that Duke Iroh was blackmailed by Marquis Morris. It's said that House Iroh took on the debts of House Morris." Listening, Claire said softly, "I see." She let out a sigh of relief and thought, "That's a relief. So it isn't that he hates me." The guard said, "We all thought it was strange too. Duke Iroh used to be a knight, yet he never introduces his wife." Claire asked, "Is it strange not to introduce her?" The guard explained, "Part of it is tradition. If a man loves his wife, he'd want to show her off, wouldn't he?" Claire said thoughtfully, "I see. So that's how it is." The guard continued, "Yeah, if it were me, I'd definitely show her off. To a knight, the comrades he trains with are like family. Since this might be a contract marriage, maybe he's too embarrassed to let others see her." Claire's heart sank at those words. Am I really that embarrassing? Seeing her expression, the guard hurriedly added, "You really do look like a proper duchess. I mean it, miss. You're so lovely that every knight would line up to escort you." Claire thought, maybe I only look decent because I'm wearing a beautiful dress. I don't know whether to be happy or upset. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them. For a knight to neglect his post just to flirt up a woman, your nerve is impressive. The guard was startled and turned around. A black-haired man was standing there. He cried out, "Ah, your highness, your highness." The guard hurriedly bowed in panic. Claire looked at him and thought, those beautiful golden eyes. I feel like I've seen them somewhere before. The guard stammered to the prince, "Your highness, this lady is..." The prince asked, "Miss, what is your name?" Claire thought, if I tell them, will they believe me? "I am Claire Morris." "No, now that I'm married, I'm Claire Iroh." The prince suddenly looked enlightened. "Ah, so it's you. That's why you seem so familiar." Claire asked in surprise, "You know me?" Smiling, he introduced himself. "Of course, I'm Keith, Iroh's friend. Though perhaps it's easier to say I'm the king's younger brother." Claire remembered. "That's right. We met once at the wedding." She asked, "Your highness, why are you here? Isn't there a gate reserved for the royal family?" Keith explained, "I heard there was a young lady outside claiming to be Iroh's wife, so I came to see what kind of person she was. I never expected to run into his actual wife." Smiling, he asked, "Did you forget your pass?" Claire answered awkwardly, "Yes, I suppose so." Keith teased, "I suppose so? You really are a bit absent-minded." Then he said, "Well then, in that case, I'll take you with me." Claire asked in confusion, "Take me where?" Keith replied as though it were obvious, "To Iroh, of course." "Isn't that why you came?" Claire said worriedly, "But I don't have a pass." Keith laughed. "Since I brought you, it's basically like entering my home, so it's fine." The guard looked at him in alarm. "Your highness, as if she really is..." "Yes." Keith answered firmly. Remember her face well. She is the Duchess of Irol. Next time, let her pass through smoothly to see Irol. Smiling, Keith said it lightly. The guard stammered, she's really his wife? He immediately bowed to Claire in apology. Your Grace, please forgive my earlier rudeness. Claire smiled and said, it's all right. Then she added, in any case, most of what you said was true. It was my fault for not having a pass. Don't worry about it. Changing the subject, she asked, more importantly, do you like sweets? Smiling at the guard, Claire said, if you do, please take this. It's a gift to thank you for keeping me company. Keith snickered at the side as Claire held out a muffin to the guard. The guard asked, oh, is that really all right? Would there be a problem giving this to someone on duty? Then he quickly added, no, not at all. I'd be delighted. The guard reminded them, if we stay here any longer, the sun will set. Shall we go now? Claire said to the guard, yes. Then I'll take my leave. I hope your work goes smoothly. They walked into a magnificent castle. Claire said to Keith, even so, I never expected we would meet before the ball. What a surprise. I'm happy to see you as well, Your Highness. Claire thought, Prince Keith, the king's younger brother. I heard he and my husband are very close. It would be best for me to maintain a good relationship with him. My husband and His Highness are the two most distinguished nobles in high society. Even someone like me, who pays little attention to gossip, has heard of them. Unlike my upright husband, His Highness is the subject of many romantic rumors. He is often the favorite topic of nobles who enjoy scandal. But perhaps because he chooses his companions wisely, those rumors have never turned into any major scandal. Keith said to Claire, I've heard about you from Irol, and I want to have a proper talk with you. Claire answered respectfully, it would be my honor to spend time with you, Your Highness. But Keith said, you can just call me Keith. Claire insisted, I couldn't possibly be that rude. Keith said helplessly, you're too formal. Then he reassured her, for this year at least, you are Irol's wife. Don't worry. Claire thought, how does he know? Come to think of it, that guard earlier also. She remembered what the guard had said. I heard the two of them will divorce after 1 year. Claire thought, I don't know how much His Highness knows. For now, I think I should act like a proper duchess. Gathering her courage, she asked Keith, does Her Highness also think my husband will divorce me within a year? Keith answered, that knight from earlier said the same thing, didn't he? Claire felt a little down. I expected it, but hearing it directly still hurts. Keith looked at her with interest. As I thought, you're interesting, just as the rumors described. I am curious. Then he continued, if Irol really abandons you in a year, I'll help you. Claire asked in surprise, goodness, if I'm abandoned, will Your Highness give me work at your estate? Keith looked half amused, half speechless. That's not what I meant, but never mind. You're even more interesting than I expected. We would always welcome you. He added, I heard you can cook and do laundry, right? Claire thought, cook and do laundry. So that means His Highness knows everything about me. Smiling at Keith, Claire said, you and my husband really are very close. Keith answered proudly, yes. Our friendship goes back over 20 years. I know everything about him. Claire said enviously, I'm so jealous. He joked, right? He tells me everything. So if there's anything you don't want him to say, wait, you're jealous? Claire answered firmly, yes. I don't have anyone around me I can talk to like that. Keith asked curiously, doesn't that make you angry? Claire replied, what would be the point of being angry? Keith looked at her, a slight smile curving his lips. You really are an interesting wife. Irol sat at his desk, his thoughts tangled. He thought of Claire. Claire has improved a lot at dancing. That's a good thing. But unfortunately, I won't get to see that apologetic look on her face when she steps on my feet anymore. A man entered and asked, Lord Irol, is now a good time to speak? Irol came back to himself. The man explained, I knocked and called your name. Irol apologized. Sorry. The man said, no, it's all right. I'm used to it. Anyway, here is the report. He handed Irol a document. Written on the cover were the words, investigation results concerning Claire Morris. The man complained, I didn't become your secretary just to investigate your private affairs. Irol said, sorry. You're the most capable and most discreet, after all. The man said smugly, well, it's true that I'm excellent. The secretary asked, but why ask about her now? You already investigated House Morris before. Irol explained, after hearing what Claire said, there were things I simply couldn't ignore. A marquis's daughter who never learned how to dance. That should have been impossible. It seems she was treated very poorly at home. Former servants said she was hardly treated like a daughter. Her only ally, her grandmother, died when she was 10. Irol's secretary suddenly remembered something and said, "Oh, right. I just heard an interesting rumor." Iril asked, "A rumor?" The secretary answered, "A young lady claiming to be your wife is waiting at the front gate. Even after getting married, you're still that popular." Iril frowned inwardly. Those women again. I thought things would calm down after I got married. And now someone is actually pretending to be my wife? Ridiculous. He thought, if I could introduce Claire to everyone, this sort of thing wouldn't happen. Then he dismissed the idea himself. She would never come all the way to my workplace for the sake of fake marriage. The secretary stretched lazily. "In any case, I'm going back to work." Iril said, sorry. I'll return it later." Suddenly, Keith appeared at the doorway, startling the secretary. "Hey, Your Highness, please knock first. You scare me to death." Pointing into Iril's office, Keith said to Claire, "Lord Iril is in there. Go on in." Without even lifting his head, Iril asked, "What do you need?" "I'm busy, so keep it brief." Keith grinned. "Are you sure about that? I have a very special delivery." Iril looked up. "What?" Claire walked in and said softly, "My lord, I'm sorry to disturb you while you're working." Iril stood up in shock and stammered, "CL Claire?" Staring at Claire in astonishment, he repeated, "CL Claire?" Keith teased, "What's this? Your wife came all this way, and that's a rather cold reaction." Claire looked uneasy. "Have I disturbed you after all?" Iril quickly said, "No, it was sudden, so I was surprised, but it's not a problem. I'll just leave these and go, so please don't worry," Claire said. Iril looked at the things in her hands and asked, "What's that?" Claire answered, "Desserts. They made a lot, so I thought I should bring some as snacks." Iril took them from her and said, "They must be heavy. Why didn't you have someone help you carry them?" Claire smiled and said, "I'm actually pretty good at physical work, you know." Todd muttered, "Good at physical work." Iril said to Claire, "Thank you. This is right about when everyone starts getting tired, so I'm sure they'll be happy." Iril turned to his secretary. "Right, Todd?" Todd smiled and replied, "Yes. I was just thinking a break would be nice." Todd said to Claire, "More importantly, my lady, I'm very glad to meet you. I am Lord Iril's secretary, Todd." Claire replied with a smile, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Todd." She curtsied and added, "Thank you for taking care of my husband." Todd said, "Well then, now that introductions are over, I'll go hand out these snacks." Claire smiled and said, "Please take your time." "Thank you." Todd pulled Keith along and said, "Come on, Your Highness, come with me. Please don't disturb the newlyweds." Keith complained, "I wasn't finished talking yet." Todd said, all right. I'm your conversation partner now." Keith said to Claire, "Your Grace, thank you very much for your help today." Claire replied gratefully, "I was very happy to talk with you." "Thank you very much." Iril said to Claire, "Don't let something like this happen again. Be more careful." Claire answered with a smile, "Yes. Next time I'll be sure to bring an entry pass." In the sitting room, Claire apologized. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced when you're so busy." Iril replied, "I'm not that busy." "It's fine." Iril asked, "By the way, I heard you were waiting at the gate?" Claire said a little awkwardly, "Yes. It's embarrassing to admit, but I didn't know about the pass." Iril said, "I'm sorry. Starting tomorrow, I want you to have one." "Who manages them right now?" Claire answered, "The butler. But to be honest, we've never used them before." Iril thought. Then perhaps even the butler forgot they existed. He sincerely apologized to Claire. "I'm sorry for making you wait outside." Claire smiled and said, "Please don't apologize. I'm used to it, and thanks to His Highness, I was able to bring the desserts like this." She continued, "I didn't know before, but they really can't make desserts in small batches, can they?" Iril suddenly understood. "I see. So that's why you brought them here." Claire answered firmly, "Yes. To be honest, I realized I probably couldn't finish them all by myself, but I really did want to share them with everyone because they were delicious." Iril looked at her gently and said softly, I know," he thought. Ever since we started practicing dancing together, Claire has begun showing so many expressions. When she first arrived at the estate, she was so timid and quiet." Claire added, "Those cupcakes were really delicious. It was my first time eating such luxurious sweets." Iril smiled and said, "If you like them, then eat them every day from now on." Claire said hesitantly, "It would be wasteful to make that much just for me every day." "Then how about we buy some from a pastry shop? Would that be all right?" Iril looked at her gently. "There's a place my mother liked. I'm sure you'll like it too." He thought, "I'll have the butler take care of it, but first I should take her there myself, so she can choose for herself." He imagined Claire's excited expression when she saw all the cakes. "I want to see Claire's face light up when she sees all the cakes there," he thought. Claire looked at him, hesitating. He said he wasn't busy, but is coming to his workplace still a bother? She thought, for now, he doesn't seem upset, but even if I ask honestly, I feel like he'd only say it's fine. Iril called to Claire. Claire came back to herself. "Sorry, what did you say?" Irol smiled and asked, "If you don't mind, may I introduce you to everyone?" Claire was a little surprised. "Introduce me to everyone? Of course I don't mind." Irol reassured her, "You don't need to be so nervous. Don't worry, leave it to me." Claire relaxed. "Hearing that puts me at ease." Irol said happily, "I'm glad." He held out his hand and asked, "Then shall we go?" Claire placed her hand in his and answered firmly, "Yes." In the distance, someone murmured, "Who is that young lady?" Another person replied, "I heard she's Lord Irol's wife." The first person asked in surprise, "What?" Irol introduced her to the crowd. "Allow me to introduce her. This is Claire, my wife." Claire smiled and curtsied. "It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Claire. Thank you for always taking care of my husband." Irol's colleagues all looked at her in surprise. Claire thought uneasily, "Did I do something rude?" One colleague quickly explained, "No, it's just that you're completely different from the rumors, so we were surprised." Claire asked curiously, "Rumors?" The colleague laughed and said, "It's nothing important. But now that I've seen you in person, I know they were just rumors. More importantly, thank you for the desserts." Another colleague added, "They're the best snacks we've ever received." Claire thought, "Even if it's only flattery, I'm still happy." Another colleague continued praising them. "That's not flattery. They didn't have too much sweet cream, so they were easy to eat while working. Honestly, they were tastier than any snacks I've ever gotten. A perfect break during work." One colleague suggested, "By the way, now that you're here, why not stay for a while?" Claire hurriedly refused. "No, it's all right. I'll be going home right away. I won't disturb your work." The colleague quickly said, "Don't say that. Lord Irol even rested in the infirmary this morning. You shouldn't push yourself. Why not go home early today?" Claire asked in surprise, "Irol, you went to the infirmary?" Claire stepped forward and placed a hand on Irol's forehead. Relieved, she said, "You don't have a fever." She apologized a little awkwardly. I was worried you had a fever again." A colleague suggested, like they said, "Why not go home early today?" "You came because you were worried about him, right?" Irol asked in surprise. "You were worried about me?" Claire said somewhat stiffly. "Weren't you looking unwell this morning? Didn't I tell you I was worried?" Irol gently stroked her hair and said, "No, I'm the one who should apologize. I'm sorry for making you worry. Todd is right. Let's go home early." The colleagues around them all smiled knowingly. Claire thought, "This is bad. He's especially gentle today. I nearly misunderstood. He's only acting like a loving husband because we're in front of everyone." Claire reminded herself inwardly, "I need to pull myself together too. As a duchess, as his wife." Irol said, "Everyone was very enthusiastic. It must have surprised you." Claire smiled and replied, "No, it was interesting. They were all very kind. I was honored to meet them." Irol said happily, "I'm glad." Then he suddenly asked, "By the way, where is the carriage you came in?" Claire said uncertainly, I think the coachman said your husband would take you home, so he left right away afterward." Irol said, "I never ride in a carriage. Riding a horse is faster." Claire fell silent for a moment, then asked, "By the way, where are we going now?" Irol replied, "To the back gate. I don't often use the main entrance." Claire said, "Come to think of it, the knight at the main gate told me women still come looking for you often." Irol thought, "That tactless fool." But Claire said, "He was kind to me." Irol said, "Next time I'll make sure they know you can come in without a pass." Claire asked in surprise, "Next time? I can come again." Irol smiled and said, "Those people will probably boast to their friends that they met you. Everyone will want to see you. It may be troublesome if I bring you here, but if you can come again, I'd be happy." Claire answered cheerfully, "Of course I don't mind. Next time I'll bring even more delicious desserts." She thought, his words are so warm. No one has ever cared for me like this. Even if this is only a temporary relationship, this feeling of ease and happiness is hard to describe. A splendid white carriage moved smoothly along the country road. Sitting inside the luxurious carriage, Claire asked uneasily, "Is it really all right for me to ride in this? This carriage belongs to the royal family, doesn't it?" Irol calmly explained, "It's Keith's carriage. Don't worry. He often uses my things without asking." Claire said with feeling, "The two of you must be very close. I'd like to formally thank and apologize to His Highness once again." Claire said gratefully, "Thank you for arranging the carriage for me. I've never ridden a horse before, so this helps a great deal." Irol smiled and said, "Leaving aside apologies and thanks, I'm sure he'd be happy to talk with you again. And thank you as well." Irol reassured her, "Don't worry. Once you get used to riding, you'll discover it's quite enjoyable. If you'd like, Claire, we could try it next time." Claire answered happily, "Really? I'm looking forward to it." Irol thought, since there was no carriage to take her back, I'll need to speak with the coachman myself. From that incident to the desserts, it seems everyone has become a little too careless about their duties. Claire said with a laugh, "But they really were delicious." Irol said, "Still, something like that ought to be properly reprimanded." Claire smiled and advised him. If you suppress them too harshly, they'll resist. This time, for the sake of the future, please just warn them lightly. Iroh asked, for the future? Claire explained with a smile, yes, not only for me. When there's a common enemy, people tend to unite, don't they? She continued, let's show a little solidarity. So please remain completely fair. But it is fair to scold people who fail to do their jobs properly. Iroh said helplessly, I understand. I'll go easy on them. Claire thought, I didn't expect him to get this angry over a temporary wife. He's so kind, but that makes me feel guilty. How am I supposed to repay him? The carriage returned to the estate. The servants respectfully welcomed them. Welcome home, my lord. Welcome home, my lady. They approached the carriage, standing in 2 rows and bowing respectfully. Claire said to the butler, may I ask something? I don't know his name, but could you call the chef who made the desserts today? After the chef was summoned, he nervously asked, oh, Lady Claire, what have you called me for? Claire asked, do you know why you were called here? The chef stammered, I thought you liked simple desserts, so only prepared some things I thought you might like. That's all. He hurriedly defended himself. I swear I meant no harm. Claire thought, then why would he deliberately do something that would make him feel guilty? Does he enjoy bullying me that much? Claire thought. Or was he trying to unite everyone by creating a common enemy? Well, whatever. I won't let anger control me. I'll deal with this in my own way. The chef covered his head and cried out, I am terribly sorry. Claire quickly said, you've misunderstood. I am truly grateful. The chef thought, my mistake made you unhappy, my lady. Huh, what is he misunderstanding? Claire said to the chef, the desserts you brought were very well received. You probably expected that, didn't you? And prepared plenty in advance, right? Thanks to that, he immediately broke the ice. Claire turned to Iroh. Isn't that right, my lord? Iroh laughed and said, haha, yes. Since they had no frosting, they were easy to eat while working. Iroh added, I've never seen a chef with such foresight. Claire said to Iroh, my lord, may I reward him for this? Iroh said to the chef, in the Edel family, rewards are added to wages. Is that acceptable? The chef said in surprise, that's too much. I only made some desserts. Iroh answered firmly, yes, then that's how it will be. Claire smiled and said to the chef, fulfilling your duty is a wonderful thing. Please continue to set an example for others. The chef stammered, why yes. Yes, Iroh said to the chef. Then we're going back to our room. You may leave now. Claire said to Iroh with concern, my lord, you might develop a fever again. Let's return to the room and rest quickly. Iroh looked at her gently and said softly, all right. The 2 of them enter the room. Is something strange? Iroh thought. Iroh smiled and said, I didn't expect you to praise him like that. Your actions always surprise me. Claire replied, well, you really did help us. Iroh asked, then can you tell me why you praised him so grandly in front of everyone? Claire explained, it's nothing serious. Praising good deeds is only natural, even if you know they came from bad intentions. Iroh asked, do you really think that's all right? Claire said firmly, yes. Don't worry, he'll get bored eventually. Looking at her, Iroh said with concern, I worry that sometimes you talk about your own problems as if they had nothing to do with you. Really? He continued, I did ask you to carry out your duties as a duchess, but I'm not asking you to force yourself. Even if it's something small, if you're having a hard time, I want you to rely on me. Moved, Claire answered, yes, I will rely on you. Then she suddenly remembered something and exclaimed, I completely forgot my goal. Claire said to Iroh, we didn't come back just to talk about things like this, you know? Please get some proper rest. Until you recover, I'll give up the right to the bed to you, my lord. Claire turned to leave. Then I'll return to my room. Please take your time. Iroh stopped her. Wait, take this. He handed Claire a bottle. Claire accepted it and asked, what is this? Iroh explained, I got it from the infirmary. It's an ointment. They say it works very well for rough hands. There's plenty, so use it as you like. Iroh gently stroked her hair and said, I'll take a bath, just as you wanted. Oh, and although I'm borrowing the bed, I wouldn't mind if you used it tonight too, Claire. Claire's cheeks flushed, and her heart began to race. Annie asked curiously, my lady, what is that? Claire smiled and explained, my husband gave it to me. He said it's an ointment for rough hands. Annie said in delight, a hand cream? That's wonderful, isn't it? I've always thought we should do something about your rough hands. Claire thought, I knew it. These hands are a problem for someone who is supposed to be a duchess. Right, Annie said firmly. Yes, they're more chapped than ours. He must have been worried too, right? May said happily, I didn't expect him to go and get something like that just for you. I guess you really are loved by him. Claire thought, I'll surely attend many banquets in the future. Bringing back this ointment is like telling me to fulfill my duties as a duchess. Then I'd better work hard and earn my reward. Claire asked Annie. If I put this on, will my hands become a little prettier? Annie replied. If you keep using it patiently, they'll improve. Claire hesitated, but I've never used anything like this before. She held out both hands. I'm not confident applying it myself. Could you help me? Annie said with mild displeasure. My lady, that joke has gone too far. For someone who always does everything herself, saying you can't do this. May agreed. Annie's right, and it's such a fine hand cream. I think it would be a waste to have us apply it for you. Claire smiled and said, it's all right. There's plenty. May you do the right hand, Annie the left. She thought, this is a good ointment from my husband. Rather than use it alone, I'd rather share the joy of using it with them. Claire said to them, just as my husband cares about my hands, I care about yours too. I want the hands you use every day in your hard work to become beautiful as well. She added with a laugh, you can think of it as a bribe so that I can win your support. May asked in surprise, a bribe? Yes, so is that all right? Claire replied firmly. May, please take my right hand. Claire said to Annie, Annie, take my left. Annie said helplessly, yes, I understand. Annie said, honestly, I don't understand what you're thinking, my lady, but I suppose there's no use hesitating. As Annie applied the hand cream to Claire, she said, a lot happened today. From now on, either I or May will accompany you whenever you go out. Claire smiled and said, thank you, but I'm fine. It was like an adventure. It was fun, but my feet really hurt because I'm not used to wearing shoes. Annie suggested, you should start breaking into shoes you'll wear to the banquet soon. If you wear them several times, they'll soften. Claire said with concern, yes. At this rate, we may not even be able to dance. May said happily, the ball. I bet you'll look beautiful dancing with my lord. Annie looked at Claire's hands and said, my lady, now that we've started caring for your hands, let's take care of your whole body too. Claire asked in surprise, my whole body? Annie explained, yes. It would be ideal to do it after your bath. We'll prepare everything necessary. Claire hesitated, but on ordinary days, isn't that a bit much? Maybe only for parties. Annie said confidently to Claire, beauty isn't created in a single day. Leave it to me. Holding Claire's hand, she joked, so will you bribe me too? Claire was amused by her words, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. She replied cheerfully, all right, then I'm counting on you. The day of the evening party arrived. Moonlight poured over a magnificent estate. Claire looked at the blue dress prepared for her and thought, what a beautiful dress. May said excitedly, of course, I can't wait to see you wearing it, my lady. Claire said a little nervously, I'm so nervous. Claire recalled, I was so excited that night that I couldn't sleep at all. She thought, my sister can't take this away from me, and no one will laugh at me for being outdated. A beautiful dress prepared just for me. Annie asked, hey, my lady, are you listening? Claire came back to herself. Saw thee. I was a little distracted. Annie said, it's normal to be distracted, but we're very busy today, so please save your thoughts for later. Claire replied, of course. Annie said, this way, my lady. Also, I'd like to ask if you have any requests. Claire smiled and said, let me think. Today is a special day, so I'll leave it to you. Annie looked slightly surprised. That's unusual. You usually tell me not to make it too flashy. Claire smiled and explained, normally I don't meet anyone, so makeup would only make your job harder, right? But today I'll be meeting many people, so just a tiny bit feels a little. You know, right? Annie said, I see. I understand. Then how do you want me to do it? Claire replied, I'll leave that to you too. That's probably better than me making some poor suggestion. She thought, besides, there are already too many lipstick choices alone. I wonder how Amelia used to give instructions. Claire imagined Amelia's instructions. This one is cute, but it doesn't suit me. Claire thought, that's no help at all. Annie looked at her. Claire said, don't look at me like that. Annie thought for a moment and said, if I had to say, maybe like a picture frame. Claire asked in confusion, a picture frame? Annie explained, like the kind used to display a painting. Claire answered firmly, yes. Annie sighed. I don't understand the connection between makeup and a picture frame at all. Claire explained, my husband is the most handsome gentleman in the kingdom. If he were compared to a painting, he'd be a masterpiece in a gallery, right? If I'm going to stand beside him, I can't clash with him or steal his spotlight. I should be like a frame that complements the artwork. Annie said, I see. I understand what you mean. So you're saying your husband is absurdly handsome, and no matter how charming you look, it still won't be too much, right? Claire said awkwardly, that's not exactly what I meant. Annie said, it's all the same. Now please look straight ahead. We don't have much time. Claire called out, Lady May, my stameret, the shoes. May was holding a ruined pair of shoes. Somehow, they ended up like this. I am terribly sorry. Claire asked, you didn't do this, did you? May explained, no, but I failed to protect them. Annie comforted her. No one would imagine the shoes would end up like this, especially inside the estate. Claire said self-mockingly, I suppose for now on I'll have to sleep holding my shoes. May stammered. I said, should we go find the culprit now? Claire said calmly, it's all right. Even if we found them now, it wouldn't help. Claire asked, are there any other shoes? Annie handed over a pair of dark blue shoes and said, This pair escaped unharmed. Claire said, how kind of the culprit to leave one pair behind. I'll wear this pair today. May answered, all right. As Claire put the shoes on, she thought, I've only worn them once. Yes, they're tight. May asked, my lady, how are they? Claire smiled and said, it's fine. I'll wear this pair to the ball. Annie said worriedly, my lady. Claire asked, what is it, Annie? Annie said seriously, during the ball, I'll figure out who did this. Claire agreed. Good idea. Damaging another person's belongings is wrong. She thought, some of those shoes I'd only worn a few times. Annie reminded her, my lady, we're almost out of time. Let's continue. Claire said, May, please help me. May replied happily, why yes, my lady. Annie looked at Claire and said, my lady. Annie gave Claire the final touches and said, everything is ready. Claire looked at herself in the mirror, astonished. May said excitedly, you look so beautiful. Well, you're always beautiful, but today you're even more beautiful. Claire smiled and said, thank you. Even if it's only flattery, I'm still happy. May hurriedly said, that's not flattery, I swear. Annie, say something too. Annie said, you always say you're plain, my lady, but I think you have a face that becomes very vivid with makeup. Iroh knocked on the door and said, Claire, it's time. Are you ready? Claire looked slightly surprised. Annie smiled and said, my lady, if you want proof that our words aren't flattery, just look at your husband's reaction. Annie called to the door. My lord, my lady has just finished getting ready. I'll open the door now. The door opened. Claire thought, I'm suddenly nervous. Does anything about me look strange? Iroh stood at the doorway in a magnificent royal guard uniform, leaving Claire momentarily entranced. Claire thought, standing beside him, anyone would pale in comparison. Now I understand why all those noble ladies are so infatuated with him. Can I really stand beside someone like him? Looking at her own appearance, she thought, my lord, this is the most dressed up I've ever been. I feel a little embarrassed. Do I look strange? Iroh looked at her, his cheeks faintly reddening. Claire softly called, my lord. She asked with concern, is something wrong? Do you feel unwell? Iroh said a little awkwardly, no. I was just stunned by your beauty, Claire. Somewhat shyly, Iroh covered his mouth. Claire thought, what a classic way to look flustered. No, he must be acting. She thought, I got carried away because of the pretty dress and makeup. I need to keep up with him. Being praised so directly is really embarrassing. Iroh said sincerely, I mean it. That dress suits you very well too. Claire smiled and said, thank you. You look wonderful too, like a noble prince stepping out of a painting. Annie smiled and said, my lady, now do you believe we weren't flattering you? May said excitedly, you both look amazing. It's like a painting come to life. Annie reminded them, this may be your first time appearing in society as husband and wife, but don't be too nervous. Just enjoy yourselves. Iroh said, in any case, we should enjoy ourselves. Claire answered, all right. Iroh offered his arm. Shall we go? Night fell. The banquet was being held in a grand mansion. Standing amid the lively crowd, Claire felt somewhat overwhelmed. In the ballroom, a blonde lady spun happily with her partner, her laughter bright and clear. Claire looked at Iroh and thought, but I have to get used to this soon. He's my husband, after all. Even so, just having him makes me feel so proud. Iroh and Claire stood among the crowd, enjoying a brief moment of peace. Iroh softly called, Claire. He said gently, everyone is looking at you. Claire said a little bashfully, please don't tease me like that. They're surely all looking at you, my lord. Iroh laughed and said, Claire, you really are always so unaware of yourself. Claire protested, that's not true. Don't compare me to someone like you, who's used to this sort of thing. She said nervously, I'm still so tense. I feel like I'm going to forget how to greet everyone. Iroh said with a smile, sorry, I didn't notice. Then before you forget, let's get the hard part over with. Claire took a deep breath to encourage herself. Yes, I'll do my best. She thought, this is my first official appearance as his wife. I must fulfill the role I've been given. Claire steeled herself. This is my first official appearance as his wife. I must fulfill the role I've been given. Iroh looked at Claire gently and said, Claire, relax. If you're that nervous, you won't last to the end. He continued, you know, a little nervousness is good for your health. Claire retorted, a little? Isn't it a bit much to say I'm that nervous? Iroh said gently, you're gripping my hand too tightly. Come on, relax. Claire whispered gratefully, thank you. A little embarrassed, she added, I guess I'm even more nervous than I thought. Iroh reassured her, now that I think about it, when I first entered society, I was the same. Claire asked in surprise, you too, my lord? Iroh recalled with a laugh, yes. My stiff right hand and right foot always moved at the same time. Claire couldn't help laughing. No way, really. Seeing her laugh, Iroh said happily, there, you finally smiled. That's much better. Claire thought. His kindness and gentle words are slowly melting away my worries. It feels warm and a little ticklish. Claire said nervously, "Tish, then let's go greet the guests. I really feel like I'm about to forget my lines." Iroh smiled and said, "It seems that won't be necessary. They're coming toward us." An elegant lady stepped forward and said with a smile, "You two look as though you're having a lovely time together. Would you mind if I interrupted?" Iroh said respectfully, "Thank you for inviting us tonight. This is my wife, Claire." He introduced the lady to Claire. "Claire, this is Countess Boyle. She's a friend of my mother's, and to me she's like an aunt." Claire smiled and curtsied. "I'm Claire. It's a pleasure to meet you." Countess Boyle smiled and said, "I can hardly believe little Iroh brought a partner. What an unexpected surprise." Iroh smiled and said, "You know, I'm already 25. I've graduated from the age of being called little." The Countess said in surprise, "Oh my, I was worried because I'd never heard even a rumor of you having any relationship." Iroh apologized, "Sorry for making you worry." Countess Boyle praised her. "Your bride is absolutely lovely." Claire replied with a smile, "Thank you very much." The Countess continued, "And you know, when Iroh was little," Iroh quickly cut her off. "Please don't bring those things up." Claire thought, listening to them talk like this, it feels like I'm seeing a side of him I never knew. Countess Boyle said to Claire, "You know, Claire, Iroh has always been stubborn. It doesn't suit that face of his at all. Once he decides on something, that's that." The Countess laughed. "I've no idea who he inherited that from." Iroh thought, "I think I'm starting to understand." Claire thought, he could be so deeply and stubbornly devoted to one person, or hide away without complaining when he's unwell. But he gets away with so much because he's handsome. Iroh said to the Countess, "Please stop slandering me." Claire began to believe it. The Countess laughed and said, "Slandering? I thought I was praising you." Claire couldn't help laughing beside them. The Countess smiled and said, "Before we married, I attended several balls." Claire thought, but this is the first time I've ever felt so welcome. Even casual conversation like this can make my heart feel so full. Realizing she had spoken for too long, Countess Boyle said, "Oh dear, I've talked too much, haven't I? Sorry, Claire. I must have said many meaningless things." Claire smiled and said, "Not at all. I'm happy to learn more about him." The Countess invited her. "In that case, next time please come to my tea party by yourself. We won't be disturbed there." Claire answered happily, "Thank you. I'd be delighted." Claire thought, a tea party. Come to think of it, I remember hearing that being invited to her tea party is a real honor. But what do people even talk about at tea parties? My sister was always bragging about them. What are they talking about while I was back home scrubbing the floors? Claire guessed, a group of young ladies together. So probably love stories, right? Like talking about their husbands, or Iroh asked, "Claire, is something wrong?" Claire answered, "No, not at all." Iroh smiled and said, "It looks like you finally relaxed a little." Claire replied, "Not entirely. I'm still trying to keep my heart from jumping out of my chest." The Countess asked, "Have you not attended many balls before?" Claire answered, "I have, but simply standing beside you draws attention, my lord." Countess Boyle said, "That is true. Iroh draws attention wherever he goes." She continued, "But Claire, you are no less than he is." Claire asked in surprise, "Me?" Countess Boyle said firmly, "Yes. Look, everyone's eyes are on you." Claire explained, "That's only because my husband is so popular." Countess Boyle laughed and said, "Not just the ladies, dear. Even the gentlemen are staring almost shamelessly." Half annoyed and half joking, she said, "I wonder if I chose the wrong place to stand." The gentlemen nearby all nervously turned their heads away. Claire said, "Does my merely being here make people uncomfortable? Before I got married, I was never invited to the Boyle household." Claire thought, "Does that mean that no matter how I disguise my appearance, I still can't deceive them?" Countess Boyle smiled and said, "Claire, you're rather unaware of yourself, aren't you?" Iroh said with a smile, "Madam, she is merely modest. Please don't tease her too much. As her husband, if she doesn't notice those looks, I feel more at ease." Countess Boyle said, "Modesty is a good thing, but you should have a little more confidence. You look beautiful tonight." Everyone is stunned. Claire asked in surprise, "Beautiful?" Claire smiled and said, "As long as I don't embarrass my husband, that's enough for me." Countess Boyle laughed. "You really are very modest." She glanced behind her. Then she joked, "We've been talking too long. Soon everyone will be angry that I've kept you all to myself." Countess Boyle smiled. "Well then, I hope you enjoy your evening." Iroh replied, "We will. Thank you very much." Claire let out a breath of relief. That was nerve-wracking, she thought. Iroh said to Claire, "Let's go. The food here is excellent." A man stepped forward excitedly and said, "Your Grace, do you have a moment? I would very much like to greet you properly." Others crowded over one after another. "Me too. Please allow me to greet you." "And me as well." After Countess Boyle left, nobles came one after another to introduce themselves. Iril said to Claire, "They're not here for the food. They just want to establish ties with the House of Edel." One man praised her. "You've become even more beautiful since the wedding." Claire thought, "I'm receiving more praise than I expected, but I won't misunderstand. Everything said to me is only because of the ducal house of Edel. That's all." Iril said a little tiredly, "We should have held a smaller ball." He asked with concern, "You must be tired." Claire smiled and said, "Now I understand just how powerful the House of Edel is." Iril added, "And there are still many people watching from a distance." Claire said in surprise, "Wow, then there's only one way to escape all these greetings." Iril asked, "What is it?" Claire extended her hand in invitation. Iril gently held out his hand and invited her. "May I have this dance?" He looked at Claire, his eyes full of anticipation. Claire looked up at him, her eyes shining with joy. Happily, she placed her hand in his and answered, "I would be delighted."